Go ahead, Keith.
Yeah, my first time on the space, so I'm a little bit
good, man.
not
All
up
good,
to
all
speed
good.
on the flow. Here's a different order thought. It could be that the deep state they're flexing their muscles on how they can use classified materials.
And before Keith, before you continue, when you say deep state, because each person has a different definition, how would you define it?
It's the permanent bureaucracy in Washington, right? And of course, they're going to support the team that feathers their nest, right? The team that wants to cut government is not going to be the one that they support. So that's pretty basic human nature. But having so many classified materials, I think there's 1 billion classified documents. They've probably been doing this in the past, but now they have 2 former presidents. They both had access, or a vice president. They both had access to classified materials, and now it could be, right? This is just me speculating, but it could be that they are using that sort of as a mechanism of control to influence their future actions and prospects of running for office again. Just a thought.
So Philip, as the former Attorney General of Kansas, you do have some legal experience.
Let me do a quick introduction here. So Phil Klein is the former Attorney General of Kansas, a very good friend of mine for a lot of years. Was a prosecutor for a decent amount of time. He is teaches at the Liberty University Law School. He does other things, most particularly dealing with election issues and other matters. That's just a quick introduction. But Phil's got a brilliant legal mind, and I think can bring some real perspective on it. Go ahead, Phil. And hit mic is off. Hit the mute thing on the bottom left there to unmute yourself where it says mic is off.
Philip, you got to unmute the mic, bottom left corner. And while Philip is doing, he just dropped out. I've got a next question, but it'll be a good time now since Philip dropped out. So I'm gonna pin above the newsletter. So that's for anyone that's late or doesn't have time to listen to the entire space. So we summarize it in the newsletter. I've just pinned it above, and I've retweeted it on my account. And we're just gonna launch that in about a week to summarize all the spaces. The next question, like listening to this and having researched it significantly in the last few weeks, because it keeps coming up, the Hunter Biden laptop story, which was part of the Twitter files drop, and now the classified documents. Would anyone be surprised? I'm jumping. Would anyone want to be surprised if there's corruption within the family or the circle around each president of the U.S. for the last few decades, if not since day one? Like, there's always going to be smoke for every president. I don't think we can stand up and say any of the presidents, has a clean record. Like, and that goes like, Ed, you're unmuting. Like, would you say would you claim there's no corruption whatsoever, since you're on the Biden side, within Biden's cabinet?
What I would say is, like, I don't like the idea that the children of presidents can get contracts overseas, because it's obvious that every foreign nation's gonna want to buy influence, and hiring somebody who is related to a president to work for your country, it's clear that you're hoping to get some kind of influence, whether the person taking the job or not. If that's their goal, we don't know. Most likely they're not taking the job, I'm going to give influence. They're taking the job because they're getting a lot of money. But at the same time, these nations are hoping for influence, whether it's, Hunter Biden, whether it's Jared Kushner, whether it's Ivanka Trump, whether it's any of the Bushes or whoever gets the job overseas. There's that potential for influence. So, I think they need to do something to prevent this from happening. But, where do you draw that line? Do you say it's at direct children? Is it at grandchildren? Is it at cousins? Is it at brothers? Is it at brother-in-laws? I don't know how you solve that problem, but I think it gives the appearance that there could be something going on.
Eric, I've got a question for you, you and Alex. What would you say is the biggest reason you think Biden shouldn't be president in 2025?
What?
Because it's definitely not the classified documents.
No.
For me, that's just such a small issue.
No. I don't know who said it earlier, but
is Eric dropping out, or is it me?
It seems like Eric's cutting out.
Cool. Alex, do you want to answer that question? Eric,
yeah,
you're back?
I'm back. I'm saying
cool. Go ahead,
said something. I'm not sure I agree with it. I agree with it, but I'm not sure if I agree with the reasoning as to why. I believe that this isn't any mistake, that these documents are coming to light, coming to fruition now, prior to Biden announcing for the run for 2024. I think it's Democrat operatives, the high-profile Democrat, big donors, important people, are likely saying, "Hey, it's not your turn. You're done. 2024 is going to be someone else."
So you think that the Alex called them the deep state or the Democratic Party, they just don't want Biden to be
I don't
president
think
in
it's the deep
2025. Like
state.
he's losing.
I think the deep state is actually is Democrat, as evidenced by the 51 former FBI officials and other officials who wrote the letter saying that the Hunter Biden laptop was Russian disinformation when it wasn't. My point is, I think it's more the Democrats. I think it's more high profile, the money behind the Democrat Party saying he's not going to be our guy for 2024.
Harry, you've got Biden on your banner on your profile. So do you agree with Eric and there's many people making that argument that even the Democratic Party don't want Biden to run for 2025. Do you agree with such a statement?
No, not at all. And I think that the idea that this is like the Democratic Party trying to get Biden out of the way is absurd because everything that Biden has accomplished in terms of major policy is really, really popular. And I think there's a lot of things that even Republicans in here can agree with. I mean, just on a basic level, restarting the Cancer Moonshot program, which looks to reduce cancer deaths by 50% by 2050 by investing in therapies, research, things like that. I think, wait, hold up. If you don't mind.
You're trying to say that he's...
If you don't, wait, oh man.
Give me a break.
Come on, guys. Like, I'm talking about like an individual level. There's plenty of things that both sides can agree with that President Biden has done. And the American people, via polling, they also agree with what Biden has done. And the midterms in a year when Democrats should have gotten clobbered. We should have gotten clobbered.
Harry, if you're gonna say that, I need you to cite something.
Not only did we only lost the House by a very small margin, and not only that, but we also expanded our Senate majority the first time since FDR. And results matter. And I think that the evidence shows that Biden would be a great candidate again in 2024, especially against Donald Trump. He beat him once, he can do it again. He beat him like a drum. So that's my view, Mario.
Biden is 1,000 years old. He's not qualified to be the president today. Anybody that doesn't understand that he has some sort of mental decline and cognitive, impair, and he's obviously cognitive.
That is extremely ageist of you, Alex.
I've also met.
I don't care.
Listen, I just want to make this point.
Oh, Alex, go ahead.
Anybody with half a brain knows that Joe Biden's not calling the shots. They know that there's somebody behind him, the DNC, or whether it's freaking Barack Obama. Joe Biden doesn't even pick out his tie. He doesn't make any decisions. He is a shadow puppet president. And the fact that you can actually stand behind him just shows you that you have no integrity whatsoever, because he is a crook. He sold us out. And then on top of that, we need to bring up Tara Reid. She's been messaging me. She was sexually assaulted by Joe Biden. So listen, the guy lied about his college. He lied that he marched in the civil rights. They're going to make sure that he doesn't run in 2024. But for all the clowns in the chat that actually support this person, you're going to have to do a lot of soul searching when you realize when the truth comes out about how evil this guy was and how bad Joe Biden was and how he said the N-word on tape, how he's done some of the most repugnant business dealings possible. All this will come to light. And then what's going to happen is you're going to say, just like with all the myocarditis and the young kids, you're going to say, oh, well, I was looking at different stats and I made the decision on this and I didn't know he was so bad. When all the evidence is there, you know that he is doing illegal business dealings with his son, protecting him. I just don't know how anybody on the left can argue that when we have him caught. Even in 2016, Hunter Biden was caught before the election, was caught with a rental car with crack cocaine in it, and the FBI decided not to charge him. You can look this up. This is all, public information. But really, for anybody here, I think, Mario, would be good and beneficial if we could bring Tara up, because she was actually, she's one of the top listeners. She was actually a victim of Joe Biden personally, so you can hear it from the horse's mouth. Not trying to call you a horse, Tara.
Yeah, we're working on that, but it might be a few minutes.
Yeah, for the record, I mean, look, I've met President Biden myself. I had the honor of being invited to the White House. And this idea that there's any cognitive decline is absurd, and it's ridiculous. And if I just have the moment to finish here, anybody who has relatives who have actually experienced cognitive decline, right? Whatever disease it may be, can see the difference. And to say that Biden has any of those symptoms, when I can assure you that I don't think anybody in here is a doctor, especially a specialist in this field,
I have
is
spoken
absurd.
to doctors who do
Is
believe
absurd.
that he exhibits.
Yeah, and
those
you know what?
symptoms.
Doctors can't make diagnoses on people they don't evaluate, right? That's just
Harry,
not how the medical field works.
They can make intelligent
Harry,
assessments.
I want to say this, Harry.
Well,
You're
it's certainly not an intelligent
Harry,
assessment if none of if it's
Harry,
not.
they can make
hold on,
intelligent
if you don't mind,
assessments if they see that a man is
if you don't mind.
stuttering
You're
and
not-
he is exhibiting all these symptoms of early onset dementia. They can make those assessments.
Ian, what
It's not very hard.
qualifications do you have to make that assessment?
I'm not the one making the assessments.
Who
Like
is?
I said, I've spoken to doctors who made those assessments. To ask the former White House physician. He is making those
I
assessments.
mean, Ronnie Jackson, the
on
conservative
TV.
in the
The
House
same
of
assessments
Representatives.
were
Ronnie
made
Jackson,
against
who
Donald
served
Trump.
Let's just be
under
clear that the
Obama
former
and
White House.
Trump.
Wait,
So-
just for the
Yeah, so just going back to the question, I think his age. Look, Harry, maybe there's no symptoms, but don't you think there's a certain age limit where, like, hey, if you get to a certain age, maybe it's not the best age. I'm not saying it doesn't matter if you're a liberal or Republican. Maybe it's not the best, the best idea for you to run a
So,
country
I
or
mean-
be the president of a country.
I mean, I could see,
Right.
like, so just to respond,
It's worth pointing out that, so doctors can't make diagnoses,
Okay, I
but
guess
you
not, I
can.
guess not.
You can diagnose Biden as being in perfect health. How? You're not a doctor.
I'll let you,
either.
Harry. Yeah, it's a valid point, Ian. I think none of us could talk about his. It's difficult to talk about his cognitive state. But Harry, just regarding the point, isn't there a certain age where a Republican or Democrat president should be like, it should be a limit of like no president could be a president at below a certain age, but shouldn't there be a ceiling as well?
So again, just to Ian, doctors have evaluated him, and again, I think we can both agree that they have more of an expert opinion
So
than
where
us.
is
Than us, like the White House,
Why
the White House
won't he
doctor.
make the details
Wait,
public?
if I can
Why
just
won't he make it
finish
public?
my point and respond to Mario. Yeah, the actual doctor who evaluates him, like his personal doctor who actually has the authority to evaluate him, concluded that he's perfectly fit to be president. And to Mario, to your point, I'm not necessarily sure I agree. So I can absolutely sympathize with the argument that
I don't
older
understand your
presidents.
point. I mean,
wait,
like,
if I
look,
can just
when
finish my
Trump-
point, please.
No, I just want to
Wait,
address
Mario,
that one
so
thing
just
that
to your
you said.
point, so
When
I
Trump
actually
was
do
being
understand the
accused of
argument.
being
If-
senile, of
Ian,
being a dotard, he had his personal physician.
So
evaluate him.
I'll let Harry just quickly respond. And Ian,
Okay.
I know you're not happy
By
with
all
what he's
means,
saying,
by all
and then you can jump in.
Yeah, so,
Go ahead, Harry.
Mario, just to restart my point. Yeah, so I can absolutely sympathize with the argument that there might that someone being maybe above the age of 80 shouldn't be president, right? I could sympathize with the point, and I could see where that someone's coming from, totally. But I don't necessarily agree with it. Like, in my view, President Biden and the view of his doctor is absolutely fit to be president, and I think his record shows. I mean, he is one of the most accomplished modern American presidents in our
Dude,
in
you
modern
get
American
paid
history,
by
right?
Midas.
So,
Harry,
oh
you
my
get
God.
paid by this
Ay,
administration.
ay, 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 ay.
The
I can't finish the
inflation,
point,
people
you know?
are struggling right now, Harry.
I
People
can't
are
finish
doing
the
worse in
point.
America than they've ever done right now. You're a
Ay,
little
ay,
kid.
ay,
You
ay.
weren't
Okay.
alive during 9/11. No, Harry, let me say something. Because
Alex,
you
my
weren't
age
alive.
doesn't matter. It's
Harry,
more of the
Harry,
brain,
age
right?
does
So go
matter,
ahead,
Harry.
go ahead,
Your age
Alex.
does
Yeah,
matter.
okay, whatever.
I want to
all
make
right.
my point, Harry, that you're a little kid. You've never experienced how bad things really are.
I'm an adult. I
Let me
can
tell
vote.
you, 9/11 was the worst traumatic event in American history. And I'm telling you, Americans are doing worse now today than we were doing after 9/11. So this country is going downhill in a handbasket. We have drugs and fentanyl overdoses at a level that have never been recorded, or drug overdose deaths in the past year than we've ever had. So young kids are dying from a border that's being flooded with fentanyl, being flooded with sex trafficking. We have a bail reform that is causing crime, violent crime, in the biggest city.
And what have Republicans done to fix that?
Well, what has Biden done to fix it? I'm just saying, what has Biden done?
Well,
Nothing.
I don't think anybody has done anything to
Republicans are
fix
not
that,
the president
frankly.
right now.
So
Well, I think trying to.
I don't think anybody has done anything to fix that. So that's the problem. Everyone fights with each other.
Somebody tried.
So
You can make that point, but Biden is the
happen.
president right now, and you have Harry in this channel telling us that Biden is the most accomplished president of all time.
No, I did not say
and
that.
Everybody loves him, and
Yes,
that it's such a disgrace to say that, because, like, you look at what happened in Afghanistan.
Well, that's not what he said.
Okay,
Ian,
wait,
right?
I
He
was about to
said that
respond to
there's
that.
Going
dangerous
out,
policies.
and
Harry's
13 soldiers lost their lives because of his fuck ups, and we're supposed to just sit here and listen to him praise Biden. What about the families of the 13 soldiers? What about the families of all the Afghans who were left behind?
But I think Ian,
disappointed by the
can't we say?
Americans?
But can't we say this about every president? You know, you
Exactly.
can say this about Bush. You can
I'm
say
sure
this
we
about
can say
Obama.
that
You can say
every
this about
president,
Trump.
But we're talking about Biden right now. That's the issue. We're talking
So-
about
so
Biden.
Harry-
Biden is
so
the
Harry-
one we're talking about. at
But
the
I think,
moment.
yeah. But Biden, when you say he's the best president, obviously I'm not making that argument, but I'm saying when you say any president is the best president, it's a relative term. So you're comparing to other presidents. I'll quickly go to Tom. Tom, I know you won't be happy with this statement. Kim is definitely not happy, but you've had your hand up for a while, so you probably want to comment on another point.
Yeah, well, I came in thinking we were talking about the classified information found in Biden's material.
Yeah, but we agree. But Tom, I have a question about that. Then, do you think we had a few panelists say that the story itself is a bit overblown, and I kind of had that sentiment as well, and that's why I thought that we'll kick it off with that discussion. It'll probably evolve into. Do you think it is overblown? And for both Trump and Biden, both are overblown.
Well, let me take a step back. 10, 12 years ago, we were asking for records that Clinton had kept. And these were recordations that had been made of a reporter of him being president, talking to foreign leader and members of Congress and such. And we said the Presidential Records Act applies here. Where's the archives? Why aren't they doing something? And we were pushed back in court by the archives, by the Justice Department, and by one of the most liberal jurists on the bench here in D.C., Amy Berman Jackson, who ultimately concluded that the Presidential Records Act didn't allow them to second guess the decisions by Clinton to keep these records. In fact, the Justice Department went to the court and said if he has records after he leaves office, they're presumptively personal. So what happened when it came to Trump, they changed their position. They ignored the precedent. They ignored the Presidential Records Act. They ignored their prior position, and they started misleading, in my view, the Trump people that he had records that they had to return. He had no right to have. And he did. And for that, he began negotiations with them, turned back additional classified materials, even though he arguably wasn't obligated to. And even if he did, he should have, in my view, said, hey, this is material that I presumed, like every other president, was mine to have. But, that wasn't good enough, and they raided his home. And so...
Sorry, Tom, can you elaborate when you say like every other president? When you say that, what do you mean by that statement?
The presumption had been prior to Trump that records the president had in his possession out after the White House were his, including classified records. And if the Justice Department, which is run by anti-Trump activists, was thinking straight, they would have known and should have known that this rule would just blow up in terms of its applicability to former presidents and vice presidents. Because under the Presidential Records Act, the vice president also has this broad discretion to declare any records as personal, or if they were in his possession, the presumption had been previously that it'd be his. Mm-hmm. And sure enough, Biden got caught up almost immediately. And I suspect they knew he was going to get caught up almost immediately early on.
Yeah. So Tom,
so it's a big deal in the sense that they changed the rules to target Trump. And the reason this is a big deal is because it was, I think, quite predictable Biden was going to get cut off. And I think other presidents and former presidents and former vice presidents are going to get caught up in this. So look, there was no good faith basis for the raid and the abuse of Trump. But of course, those are the new rules of the Justice Department. So now Biden's caught in the same predicament. But if there were only smart folks who followed the prior law and precedent and practice, they would have said, this is just, we can't let the fact that Trump has this basically override our prior practice and what our understanding of the law has been.
Would this be a fair statement? Like you've explained Trump's situation and having the presumption that, hey, these are files I should be able to keep. And then Biden's, the argument being made that this was just an accident. If you take both arguments, do you think that this is just a nothing burger and it's not that serious of a matter relative to all the other issues that we could discuss?
Well, maybe, but that's not the way the Justice Department has been treating this. Now, if in the ordinary course, Biden took these records or these were taken and they were vice presidential records and, practically speaking, they're his now, it would be, in my view, the same way for Trump. But the Justice Department hasn't taken that legal position. They've changed their legal position and have decided that presidents, former presidents, and former vice presidents are subject to prosecution over this dispute that I've described. So it doesn't matter if it's innocent or not. It now needs to be investigated. And the other issue with Biden, I think that complicates it, is that I'm not convinced the story we're hearing holds up under scrutiny. I mean, with Trump, it was relatively straightforward that the records were presidential records or, records in the White House at one point, and they moved to Mar-a-Lago. And, that was generally the large, that was the large group of records that were at issue. Here you had records that ended up in 3 different places we know about thus far. The classified records were distributed among 3 different places, which, suggests that the records were used. And, maybe they weren't from the vice president's office, meaning the president, this was material that the vice president's office had packed and sent along. Maybe, given our experience, that others were involved and were either taking these records or using them for other purposes. I mean, by others, you can't ignore the elephant in the room, Hunter Biden, who was, the evidence strongly shows, was using his father's office with his father's approval and encouragement and participation to line his own pockets.
Ed, do you know respond? Ed O'Brien, Harry, John, Nick, go ahead.
No, it's okay. I was going to defer to Ed anyway.
Yeah, Ed or Harry, go ahead.
I think it depends on what the documents are. If they're just, simple classified documents, maybe.
What do we? So what do we know about the documents?
No,
we don't know much about.
It doesn't depend on what the documents are.
What if they're top secret SCI documents?
I mean, there's no. You don't have a legal out because the documents aren't that classified. And that's not a distinction within the law.
But let's be clear here.
You're referring to what? You're saying Biden or Trump?
There's no
either way
wrongdoing against being accused against Biden. If you actually read the statutes surrounding classified documents, there's just no evidence as it stands that Biden committed any crimes.
But wait a minute.
What is that? Who's saying that?
That's me. I'll happily respond to this, Ian. Or sorry, Nick. I think you were talking. Go ahead.
Well, sure. I just wanted to make a distinction here, and this is part of the argument. And Tom did bring it up, and I think we had a little bit of a conversation about this last time. Is Trump does have the ability, it doesn't have to be in writing or anything like that, as president of the United States to unilaterally declassify whatever he wants to, as long as he says the words. But does Joe Biden, as vice president of the United States, have that same ability? I think that is
I think that's quickly debatable.
Can I explain? Can I explain what my understanding of the law is? Rather.
Okay, I'm muted as well. So Tom, yeah, go ahead. I'll let you respond quickly, Tom. Then I do want to go to Phil and Kyle. I just get a bit of more details on the technicalities on the regulations and repercussions if they take classified documents home.
Mario, the classified. This is the nature of the classified issue here. The president is commander in chief. He has inherent authority that really can't be challenged by anyone else to classify or declassify material. Now, other people in the administration, by view of executive order and theory by statute that kind of help him in that regard, get derivative classification authority from that, right? So the vice president, for instance, his declassification or classification authority, which is much more limited, flows from the presidency. But then there's a statutory issue. There's a law that was passed, the Presidential Records Act, that gives the president, according to the court interpretation and prior archives and Justice Department interpretation, virtually unbridled authority to designate as presidential or personal records. And presidential records necessarily include classified records. And the vice president has the same exact authority under the statute. Therefore, he's got that unbridled authority as well. So he may be limited in other circumstances in terms of classification and not classification. But in handling of, quote, presidential records, he can't be second guessed. And if that happened here, then he should get a get out of jail free card, just as Trump should. But that's not the position the Justice Department has taken. And it's unfortunate. And if I were lawyers or if I were a former president or vice president, I'd be worried everyone's going to come after me too, because you can bet they either have classified records or presidential records that they can claw back under law, or they could be prosecuted because they were alleged to have done it the wrong way. I mean, I just wish there were some adults who had been running the Justice Department rather than the anti-Trump fanatics who thought, well, we'll just see what we can get away with And who cares what the
comments?
what
I'll give you.
are?
I'll tell you this, Tom. The comments. I'm going through the comments. And by the way, audience members, if you have questions, again, bottom right corner, you can ask questions for the panelists. But the comments seem to agree with you, Tom. Harry's been waiting for a while. Harry, Ed, go ahead, guys. And then I want to actually, after you, Harry and Ed, if to Kim, you're still awake, if you haven't gone to sleep yet, I want to ask you that same question. Like, how serious of a matter is this?
Yeah, I literally just dozed off and heard my name, and now I'm awake.
so still, we're still talking about the classified files. Harry, Ed, I'll give you the mic in a bit. But Tom made a good argument on why this should be taken seriously. Would love your thoughts on it as well.
Yeah. So just the thing here is that I think Tom mentioned the Presidential Records Act. And I don't actually, and like making it an offense that can be prosecuted now, basically. That's not even what the Department of Justice and the FBI is accusing Donald Trump of. I mean, if you look at the search warrant, they're accusing him of 18 U.S. Code 2071, 18 U.S. Code 1519, and 18 U.S. Code 793, which is not necessarily having to do with the Presidential Records Act. And also none of these, and just to like clarify an earlier point I made, like none of these allegations are being made.
I mean, Harry, what are you talking about? What statutes are you referencing?
I can read it. Yeah, sure. So 18 U.S.
You're referencing conspiracy. You're referencing the mishandling classified information. And obstruction.
No, I'm
right.
So I'm referencing.
Doesn't mention classified. It's just national defense information.
Yeah, I'm referencing
national defense information. So but that whole search warrant falls apart under my analysis.
Why?
Is that the records are presumptively personal, so there's no basis to suggest, even if the records are marked classified, that there's national defense information at issue here. They just changed the rules, and once you change the rules, what you hear in terms of justifying a search warrant on Trump would justify search warrants on every former president and vice president, given the fact they were following the rules of good faith before.
Yeah, but Tom, are you saying if Trump literally took a document that had spies' names and addresses on it and didn't tell anyone and nobody knew that he took it, that would be okay?
When he took it.
So here's the thing.
If he designated the record as personal under the law, it's declassified.
Let me finish the question, Tom. So let's say,
she worked for the Senate and she worked for Biden.
Can I just finish this
sentence? I would like to get her on, if that's okay with you, Mario.
I've already brought her up. In the meantime, Ed, I'll let you respond, and then we'll give the mic to Tara.
I just want to ask Tom a question. So are you saying that, let's say Trump
Hi
walked
there,
out of the White
can you
House.
hear me? Because I can't hear you.
Yeah, I'll fix it now. Was that you? Was that Tara speaking?
So say that Trump
I'll
walked
fix it
out of the White House with a document that contained U.S. spies' names, addresses, information, and nobody in the government knew he had this. Would that be okay?
I mean, I don't even know what that means. I mean, he can handle classified records as he sees fit. He can unclassify them.
Say he went home
and
after
he could call you up, and the President Biden could call you up and read you the list of every double agent we have planted across the world. And there's nothing there's not anything anybody could do about it under the law. So if you don't want the president to have that ability, you have to change the Constitution.
That's right. Because listen, it's presumptive that the president never mishandles classified information. Now, he might be stupid about it. He or she might be stupid about it. But under no circumstance ever does a sitting president ever mishandle classified documents. The only reason or all classified documents that he wants at any time or wants to do anything with, he can. That is the executive authority that lay within the president.
What I'm saying is now that Trump's no longer president, can he have these documents with spy names on them sitting in Mar-a-Lago?
Yes, because he can declassify them at any time while he is sitting in office.
Yeah, but wouldn't
he doesn't have to fight. Hold on, Ed.
Wouldn't the national defense team need to know that these are declassified?
No, Ed. No, he does not have to consult the anybody within his administration about what he wants to classify documents.
That's not what multiple defense experts have said.
But that's what the Listen, Ed, it's what the Constitution said.
He can declassify anything he wants. When he is the president, he can do that, and that's exactly what he did.
Somebody,
it doesn't matter if he's not the president.
No, Ed.
Somebody doesn't get killed.
Hold on, Ed. We got to lay a marker here. The president.
No, I disagree with you, Jim. From what I've read,
Ed, let me make my point.
So go ahead, Jim.
Listen, the reality is that everyone who works in the administration is subject to the president. The president is not subject to anyone in the administration. So he doesn't have to consult anybody. I mean, he would consult them to say, what do you think about this? What would be the effect of this or whatever? He could consult them in that way, but he requires no accountability to anyone in the administration. They are all accountable to him because the Constitution says that the president is given executive authority, period. No one else has
I understand that, but okay,
the funny thing is that
let me give you guys an example. Let's say
Ed, hold 1 second. Judicial Watch had made your argument, right? We thought, well, these records are presumptively presidential. It can't be he can just walk out with them. And they came back and they told us, no, we lost. That's why I'm sensitive about this case, because I've made the argument you're making. I've made the argument the Justice Department and the archives are now making, I think, in bad faith. Judicial Watch has, or lawyers have. And the court and Justice Department and archives told us no. In fact, the court said, how are you going to enforce this? We're going to start raiding his home? It's absurd what they're doing. And it was all to get Trump. We took the position you're taking.
So essentially, Tom and so essentially, you guys,
Justice Department
so Tom and Ed. So then you guys agree, Ed and Tom, you agree that this is how it should be, but this is not the way it is. Ed, is that a fair statement?
The law is what it is.
It's very concerning to me that Trump could have documents. So Trump took this document home.
Let's remove Trump. Let's just put president, any president.
A president takes a document home that has spy names on it. An aide that worked for him also had access
it pisses you off. It
also had
this doesn't matter who it pisses off.
Hold on. Set him.
Trump
Hold
took
on.
the document home.
Hang on, Jim. Let Ed finish. Let Ed finish.
Yeah, go ahead. Ed, finish your statement, Ed. Now I want to go to Tara. Go ahead, Ed. Finish your statement.
Yeah, like, is everybody not hearing me? Because I keep getting.
No, we can. No, bro. I think everyone just doesn't agree.
Okay, so
go ahead.
So let's say a president takes home a document that has the names of U.S. spies on it, and somebody else that works in administration who doesn't have declassification power also has that document at home, and starts sharing it with people. Is that other employee of the government responsible for getting spies killed since Trump or since another president took that document home and automatically declassified it without telling anyone?
Tom, Jonah replied to that one
well,
legally. Tom, maybe you can. Tom, before you reply, can you reply to it on both viewpoints, legally and what you think the way it should be?
Well, as commander in chief, the classification arises from his position as commander in chief. So, as president, in order to change that rule, you'd have to change the Constitution. And because classified information essentially is about military secrets or secrets related to foreign policy. So unless you want to have others involved making foreign policy, which is what the founders didn't want, they wanted the chief executive to do so, you'd have to really radically change the Constitution. But we've made this argument about the control of records before, and we lost. And they said to kind of undo it kind of gets at the heart of the core presidential powers. That's how I'm interpreting it. And this is why you need to be sure that when you elect someone president, he's someone who's trustworthy. And the check on that abuse is impeachment.
And by the way, we have to set a marker that's really important here, because Ed, the substance of your argument means that, and whether you mean it precisely like this or not, the net effect of what your argument is that the president is subject to people working in the administration. Now, we all accept the fact that people in the DOD, State Department people, and others that deal with these sensitive matters that we classify related to what we do around the world and other even internal issues, we recognize that these are all experts. But the point is that they don't run the show. The president runs the show. That's what happened with Judicial Watch's case when they argued related to Bill Clinton. They made it very specific that no, these are part of what happens in the administration and must remain within it, and therefore we got to get them back. And the answer is, and I think it's the constitutional one, is no. And again, we have the check of impeachment, and we have the check of the election ballot as well to work against this. But if we take the executive power away from the president of the United States, then we are placing it into bureaucrats of any sort in the United States. And that is not what was envisioned here. We are envisioned to be a republic that was represented by people that we elect, who are the ones that have the authority given to them in the Constitution. And that's really what's at stake here.
So Tara, I'd like to get your feedback on this, because you were you have a law degree, you worked for the Senate, and
you love
and then
you love Joe Biden, is like you're a big fan of Biden. Go ahead, Tara.
Hi, Mario, and thank you.
Hey, good to have you back. Good to have you back.
Yeah, and I really appreciate these spaces because it allows debate and allows a lot of different views. And Tom really made some good points. So I want to speak directly to the documents and stay on that. For those of you that don't know, I worked for Joe Biden in 1893. Before that, I worked as an intern for Leon Panetta. My father, whom I was not very close to as an adult, but he worked with classified documents in the Pentagon, and he was a defense contractor, unfortunately. I'm anti-war, so I have different views, but he's no longer with us. He died. But my bringing that up is that there's a very strict protocol about staff handling classified documents. However, things happen and things get disorganized. When I was working for Joe Biden in the Senate, for those that don't know, I was sexually harassed and sexually assaulted. I came forward, not publicly, but went through Senate protocol, and I filed a sexual harassment report with the Senate. They didn't really have a formal process like they do now. It was 1993, so it was very different. It was like a counseling office, so I did basically like an intake form. So when I came forward publicly in 2019 and 2020, I was trying to find that form, and I was informed eventually, after a lot of talk, that it was archived in the University of Delaware, where Biden has droves of documents stored and sealed from the public. They are not allowed to see them. So it surprised me that there's all these classified documents floating around, because there was a very concerted effort to seal my complaint and not allow it to the public. In fact, Tom can speak to this better, but Judicial Watch actually tried to get those documents and get them to unseal, and this the state court of Maryland ruled that it wasn't in the public interest to release his files, which had to do with a lot of things, not just maybe my complaint was there. It had to do with foreign policy and such. I kind of tend to agree with the people who have said they think the Democrats are perhaps throwing Biden under the bus. I think Gavin Newsom will be the candidate for the US presidency for Democrats. I think that's who they want. I think there's a struggle going on behind the scenes with the elites. But more to the point, my personal opinion about classified documents is that it can be used to cover up corruption. Like in my case, there would have been, physical evidence. There's other legal evidence, like there's a, which I won't go into because I don't want to bore everyone here about that. But like the fact that I can't get that document to show is frustrating for me. But it's a very small, minuscule example of how someone can use something like a document and say, oh, this is not in the public interest, it's classified. So I think it's important that we maintain our, as America, maintain our sovereignty and protect our nation, of course, but there also needs to be a balance with protecting the people as a whole. And I have been trying to raise the alarm about Biden's corruption. I was very aware of it. I experienced it directly. I watched it in action. And I can tell you that I think the classified documents is the tip of the iceberg. I think there's been economic corruption, which I think is being uncovered. And I think probably in a couple of years, we'll know a little bit more. But the fact that one of those classified files says Ukraine on it from back with 2016, 2014 era, right? And Julian Assange raised the alarm about the coup that was backed by American forces, Western forces for that. I'm talking to you as a longtime Democrat. I'm talking to you as a multi-generational Democrat and someone who worked for them. And I was literally thrown under the bus when I came forward. It was heartbreaking. I can't tell you what that's like to have a career and to really believe, not just have a career, but to believe in the Democratic Party and to be thrown aside because this happened. And I assure you, in 1993, Joe Biden sexually assaulted me. I wish he hadn't. I wish I'd never worked for him. I wish I would have, applied and stayed after my internship with Panetta and done a whole different career, but I didn't. And once you see the corruption, you can't unsee it. Once you hear it, you can't unhear it. And so, Harry, I know you're in the space and I know you're a believer in the Democratic Party, but you will be thrown to the wolves if you do not follow the message lockstep, or if something happens to you. I'm telling you that from personal experience. And if you continue to carry water for them, knowing that there are people who've been harmed, you're complicit. And so I refuse to be
Tara,
complicit.
I have a question for you, Tara. First, thank you for sharing your story. And I know, Harry, I'd let you respond because I know she referred to you. But one question for you, Tara. Do you think, like, you've experienced the ugly side of the Democratic Party, especially with Biden? Do you think, would you say that the Republican Party does not have any corruption, or do you think that corruption is on both sides of the aisle? I want to just get your perspective on it. Like, I know you experienced it on the Democratic side, but would you expect it as a okay?
Both sides. I mean, I'm not a Republican. I've never voted Republican, and it's not my thing. I'm anti-war and I'm anti-imperialist, and I had aligned myself with the Democratic Party. Now I'm not a Democrat anymore, nor will I be. I want to make an analytical talk about, I'm not just saying this because I don't like Biden. Okay, it's not about that. Bear in mind that Cuomo, who had the scandal about the nursing homes, all the nursing home deaths, if you recall that, then all of a sudden the sexual misconduct came up, and he was like America's hero, remember, during COVID, all that stuff. And then he wasn't when it really there was evidence that he lied with staff, and all that came forward. And when the Democratic National Committee, the elites that run that party, that part of the organization, decided he needed to go, they used the sexual misconduct. It was already there. Everybody already knew it, but it was a quick way to throw him under the bus. And I really see that it happened, and I believe the women that came forward about Cuomo, but nobody cared about it until they made people care about it. In my case, Biden was one they wanted to protect. So unlike Trump, where they went after him, and he's gone after for sexual misconduct, and it's been talked about, I was attacked and I was personally dragged. Kranzenstein, who's in this space, was one of the people who personally dragged me, and he is a paid Democrat.
Yeah. It's
I know. So Tara, you've referred to Harry and Ed. So if you don't mind, Ed, I'll let Harry respond first, and then I'll give you the mic afterwards. Harry, do you want to go first to respond?
And then
to
I'll try to keep it short.
And we'll go to Ed.
I'll just try to keep it short because
Actually, I have a question for you. What do you agree, from what Tara said, because she made a lot of points. Which points do you agree with, and then obviously the points you disagree with?
I mean, I agree with being anti-war, anti-imperialist. That's kind of some things that I heard that I was like, yeah, for sure. But just responding to her saying like, obviously I'm sticking up for the Democratic Party and things like that. It's like, I'm voluntarily involved with the Democratic Party. Like, I'm not doing this because anybody in the Democrat Party works with me. But what I will say, Tara, is that, I've worked on the ground here with a lot of amazing people in the Democratic Party. I've worked with even people in the executive branch and the legislative branch, and I've coordinated with these people, and I've talked to them on a one-on-one basis. And, these people are really good people. Like, their hearts are in the right place. And, maybe you disagree with me, and that's fine. But I'm just.
But Harry, would you say there's good people and bad people on both sides of the aisle?
Don't get me wrong. Yeah.
Like, I always just.
Yeah. I mean, there's bad. I'm not saying...
Even Tara, because I think you both agree on this one. Because Tara made that same point. She said, like, she's talking about she's critical of the corruption on the liberal side, especially with Biden. But she said, I'm sure there's corruption on the Republican side as well. Yeah. So Harry, you'll agree with that point, I guess, as well.
Sure.
But you're more leaning.
Look, don't get me wrong. There's bad people on both sides. There are people who do bad things on both sides. No doubt, 100% agree. But just from my experience within the Democratic Party and the people I've worked with, and as I mentioned earlier, I've had the honor of meeting President Biden, President Obama. These people are really good. These people are really, really good people, and their hearts are in the right place, in my view. And I don't think the Democratic Party is just trying to cast anybody aside or anything like that. I'd have to see like some evidence for that, other than just like following maybe what you consider to be a logical position.
Tulsi Gabbard came forward about the discrepancy with Bernie Sanders, and she was almost immediately expelled, called a Russian agent, and the Democrats would have nothing to do with her.
Yeah,
There's an
Tulsi Gabbard has
example.
some really bad viewpoints, right? And she said some pretty bad things.
Marianne Williamson, another one.
I've met Marianne Williamson personally, and
well, what I'm saying to you, and she said, what I'm saying to you, Harry, is I appreciate your views. I had them when I was young, but I was sexually assaulted by Joe Biden. I don't see him as a good person. He's had me in a corner and he stuck his fingers inside of me without my consent. That's sexual assault.
And I'm not discrediting your. I'm not here to talk about.
So Ed, I'll go. Yeah. So I'll go to Ed because I know Ed and Tara. I don't know the full story, but I know that you guys have had history together. But Ed, if you can, and while the way I'm going to go through the comments from the audience members. Ed, I know you're dying. I'll give you the mic in a bit. Just for audience members, I just want to get thoughts on if anyone disagrees or agrees with the statement that there is likely corruption on both sides of the aisle. I try to find points that we all agree on. So I'll go through the comments there. But Ed, I want you to kick it off if you can. I know it's going to be difficult. What do you agree with from what Tara said, and then obviously what the history is,
so,
and why you guys clash?
Agree.
Let's see if we can make you guys friends.
I definitely agree that there's corruption on both sides. That most definitely. I mean, I think it'll be dumb to assume otherwise. But as far as Tara goes, me and Brian actually did articles on her back when her accusations against Biden came out. We went over some of the facts, some of the things she said and did in regards to Biden allegations. Whether she was sexually assaulted or not, I don't know. If you want to take her word for it, go ahead. But Tara, you made a tweet, I guess it was maybe a month or so ago, claiming that I issued death threats against you, I purchased an old phone number to stalk you, and that I hacked you. And that's just absurd. You also claim that you have
I actually made a report to the FBI.
You also claim that you have a
recording of it.
Can I finish saying?
Hang on, Tara.
Yeah, I'll let you respond. Yeah, go ahead.
So no, can I finish real quick?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, of course.
You claim to have a police report of when this happened. So I just want you to post that police report.
It was with federal law enforcement because when it's
can you post
online,
it, please? Can you post that police report?
Because you know what? Because I already did send it. Actually, I sent it to Mario.
So how do you know it was
emails.
Me making death threats against you?
They don't. The FBI doesn't give you a police report. But I showed the emails to Mario. But like, Eddie, maybe it wasn't you, and maybe it was someone.
Can you post it?
Hang on, Ed. Hang on. Let her respond.
Let me finish. My daughter answered the phone, and you were identified as Eddie Kranzenstein, and there was screaming and laughing in the background, and it was a death threat towards me. Whether it was meant toward my daughter was the one who was traumatized by it because she answered the phone. I made a federal law enforcement report in 2020 about it. And they were the ones who told me that my phone number was purchased by you. If you want to talk further with me about it, I can give you the agents' names. And
I'd love Ed. How is Tara and Ed? Would you agree with this? I have an idea.
So
Ed,
I may have used a service to get your phone number because I was doing an article and I called to get your information. And I recall somebody answering the phone and said you weren't available, and I said, okay, can you have her call me back? I absolutely never made a death threat, but if you have that,
hold on. So I have a question. So hold on, Tara, do you have a recording of that call?
I do. It's with FBI
Please
as well.
post it.
Okay, hold on, Ed. Ed, trust me. I'll trust me on this one. I'm trying to find middle ground. So Tara, I have a question. So would you say that it's possible that it could be someone other than Ed, or you're certain it is Ed? It could be someone pretending to be Ed.
It could, yeah. I mean, it could. Okay. I mean, like, I'm willing to be open to that. I am willing to be open to that. What I'll do is share the information that I have with
you have a
Mario.
recording of my voice.
Some of it.
Ed, hang on, man.
Ed, bro.
Ed, he's in your corner. Let him handle it.
Yeah, sorry. Go ahead, Tara.
Yeah, I don't want to accuse anyone of anything horrible. I mean, I'm already going through it. Like what I went through with Biden is enough. So Eddie, what I will say is about you and Brian is you did go after me in quite a surreptitious way. You also alleged things that didn't happen. In fact, I had to take legal action, and now with other people that were, giving you, I guess, false information, and there's a cease and desist letter, and there's, I had to get a lawyer involved. But my thing is with you all is regarding the recording. I do have it. I can talk with Mario about it.
Ed.
So
go ahead. Sorry, Tara.
But I think what's more important is I'm a sexual assault survivor, whether you appreciate that or not. I wasn't politically motivated to go after Joe Biden. In fact, it was the opposite. I voted for Obama, even though Biden was vice president, and I didn't want to. And there's a witness at that time that I talked to about the assault when I did that. I've been a very long time Democrat. The reason I came forward, Eddie and Harry, who are listening, who are very strong Democrats, is Lucy Flores is a young Democrat politician in Nevada who came forward about Biden being creepy and kissing her on the head, and she got torn to pieces in the press. Now, you no longer see her because her career ended, right? Because of that. And I decided to come forward in 2019. My daughter was an adult, and I felt the Me Too movement was there, and Time's Up was there, which is that organization that helps, people who come forward about powerful people. I didn't know at the time that Anita Dunn, who was the founder of Time's Up Legal Defense Fund and, was also has the PR firm, was already working for Joe Biden, and they didn't tell me. So all of this was happening at the same time you all were kind of, I'll just say it, in my opinion, stalking me, trying to get negative, trying to discredit me, and you wouldn't allow me to be safe when I came forward. I got death threats. My daughter got death threats. All of this is documented. My horse almost got taken. I had to call the sheriff. It was like horrible things that happened. I lost my work. I lost my housing. I lost my money coming forward about the truth. And it's been very painful. I mean, AOC was someone I supported. All of these people were people I supported, and they have been silent about what happened to me because they took a party line. So all I want to say in this space right now is, because let's get back to the documents.
So before Tara, before we go back,
how.
Tara, do you mind before we get back to the documents? Because my goal is to make you and Ed friends again. So you've expressed very valid concerns regarding what happened with Ed. Ed, other than asking for proof regarding the recording and stuff, so your main concern, Ed, is regarding the allegations of death threats. Is that your main concern? Your main?
Yeah, I mean, if she has a recording like she says, post it so you can hear my voice.
Okay, I got. So perfect.
I bet you
okay,
do
so,
that, Tara.
okay, cool.
So Ed,
that's Ed's response. So Ed, Tara, on this point, maybe we could take it offline, and hopefully maybe we can come back in another space and we could disagree and be on and then agree on more things. I want to go to Tom, if you don't mind, Nick, because I do want to continue that discussion. Tara, I'm going to send you my number, Ed, as well, and then we could discuss it offline. I want to go to Tom, Alex, and Catherine to keep the discussion going. Tom.
Yeah, Tara's point about the records in Delaware, I think, is important not only because the Senate records that Biden had from his 30 years in the Senate, every one of those records is being withheld from the American people. So not one record has been publicly released, and they're being holed up in the University of Delaware as the result of a secret deal between that university and Biden, and they don't want that deal to be public either. And if you're trying to figure out what Biden was up to in the Senate, both in terms of corruption and this and other alleged sexual misconduct and assault, these records may provide some key information about it. And it's just remarkable to me that we have the billions of dollars in our major media with virtually no interest in gaining access to these records. And it's up to Judicial Watch and another nonprofit journalist entity, the Daily Caller News Foundation, to try to sue and get these records. And it's tough to get because typically you can't get access to records like this, even if they are maintained with tax dollars. The University of Delaware is refusing to even give us the basis for saying, well, there are no tax dollars behind it. So it's kind of it's a big, complicated fight up there, but it's ongoing. Of course, all of it can be with a snap of Biden's fingers ended if he just releases the documents. But they have at least publicly stated that these documents won't be released until after he leaves politics, at least 2 years. So I just want to know also, because of the new rules for the handling classified information, if we should presume that there's no classified information among these records, given Biden's sensitive roles as head of the Foreign Affairs Committee and other big slots there when he was in the Senate. But, these are only questions we're allowed to ask for Donald Trump, not for those in the protected elites and the protected classes here in Washington, D.C. So Tara's allegations, if it were about a conservative or a Republican, it would be the number one descriptor of that conservative or Republican. Joe
Tom,
Blow, who was accused of by Tara Reid of sexual assault, is running for office X, but Biden gets a pass.
Right. So Tom, quick question for you, because just for our audience here, you are the president of Judicial Watch. You guys are known for filing Freedom of Information Act requests a lot, right? I mean, you're an organization that
Right.
focuses on transparency. When a document is declassified, how much of an ability do you have to be able to go in and pull those documents via a FOIA request and actually be able to make them public? Is that something that's easy to do if there's no classification, or?
Well, you kind of, it's, if you know what the document is, you can always go in and ask for it specifically. So it's hard to necessarily figure that out without having, either public disclosures ahead of time. But in the case, for instance, of Trump, he specifically declassified some records about the Russia smears on him as he left office. And, there's a public letter that they were declassified. There was a reported letter they were declassified, and we still can't get them. They're still stonewalling the release of those records to us. So you can go in and, for instance, and ask about topic. Let's say you want all records about Burisma, right, and Ukraine. So there could be records amongst those that are classified, and you get parts of them, or they're withheld in their entirety, or in some circumstances they won't even confirm or deny they have them. They're so classified. But sometimes that process leads to the declassification of records, and that's why it's important to try to pursue these and ask for these records, because they may be initially classified. But for instance, in the case of the FISA warrants that were used to, in a unprecedented fashion, spy on the Trump team, we got them declassified as a result of our records requests and lawsuits, and that was a decision made by presumably the Trump Justice Department. So you got to fight either. There's no easy answer. As a non-lawyer, I know there's no easy answer. There's all sorts of caveats, but if the government wants you to see material and it's classified, they'll declassify it if it's politically helpful to them.
Right. So I want to go to Catherine and then Alex here in a minute, but I do want to say, put your questions for Alex down here in the bottom right-hand corner. Hit that purple button, leave us a reply, and we'll have some questions for Alex here in just a second. But Catherine, you've had your hand up for a while. Go ahead.
Thanks. Yeah, so I've been listening for a while and just reading up some of the coverage as well. So I'm pretty nonpartisan on this issue, and I've just been trying to look at the facts of it. So, it seems to me like the distinct difference between what Trump's and Biden's situation is that Biden's attorneys had looked for these documents and then they reported them. And that seems to be the main sort of argument for Biden supporters in particular. But when I really look at these cases, it seems that the reporting was done after the fact. And at the same time, it seems that the alleged violation is the same, the alleged violations that have been committed. So the only other sort of distinction as I look at this is that, Trump may or may not have had that power to declassify the documents that he was in possession of since he was president at the time. And that is something that will be sort of settled, I think, in the legal process. So, and then I find it quite interesting that the documents specifically contain U.S. intelligence and memos about Ukraine and Iran, which in Biden's case, which does seem, pretty heavy in terms of content. So I do think, like, in a very objective way that I'm trying to look at it, it does seem to me that we are looking at, there is a lack of objectivity in the way that it's being treated in the media, because the crime to me does seem ultimately the same, just because after the fact, the two candidates sort of dealt with it, or not candidates, the two, Trump and Biden both dealt with it sort of in different ways. It doesn't sort of negate the actions themselves. So that's kind of my perspective of it, trying to look at it like completely removed from the individuals themselves. And I see Harry.
So Catherine, just to be clear here, you don't see any difference between a vice president and a president taking declassified documents?
Well, the only difference would be, and this depends on the legal judgment, and I don't know, for sure, right? So that some people make the claim that Trump acted in a different capacity because maybe he has the ability to declassify these documents without necessarily saying anything to anybody. So that's a little, yeah. Well,
but how? Yes. So but how?
The legal issues here. I would like Tom to reply to that one exactly.
Tom?
Yeah, the Presidential Records Act gives the same power to Biden as to Trump, and everyone defending Biden is accidentally or maybe on purpose, because maybe they want it all to go away, highlighting the abuse of Trump. Because if Biden did nothing wrong, Trump did nothing wrong. There's it's an apples to apples comparison, arguably worse for Biden, since he's been on notice since at least last year about the sensitivity, the new sensitivity of records in the custody of former presidents and vice presidents. And then on top of that, we have the additional scandal of them knowing about this at least since November, just before the election, and them hiding key developments about this scandal as they're targeting Trump with unprecedented law enforcement action for months and months. And I suspect the reason it became public just now was because they saw that they were going to have new leadership in the House that would probably gain access to this information and expose it.
I have a question before going to Andrew and Harry. I'll ask you and Alex that question. Why did Trump fight so hard not to give the documents back to the DOJ?
He did give the documents back to DOJ. He gave them the 15 boxes, even though he arguably didn't have to. And then afterwards, they issued a subpoena based on this shady allegation or this fake allegation that he wasn't allowed to have classified material. So they asked for a subpoena of all records marked classified, and they did a search and produced records. Now there's a dispute about the sufficiency of that search or whether there was any obstruction and withholding any other documents. And I haven't seen any evidence of that.
And I just want to say, I want to make this point.
I find it weird to put.
Go ahead, Alex. Go ahead, Alex.
Alex, hard to talk in these spaces, but listen, we're here circumcising an ant, guys. We know Hillary Clinton had a private email server. Nobody cares about that. We know that the Steele dossier was fake. We know that the Department of Justice through Obama was spying on President Trump during his campaign. So listen, there are much bigger fish to fry than these stupid classified documents. Now, I mean, for me, the reason why it's important now is because I do believe that they're going to use this as an excuse to get rid of Joe Biden, to put in Kamala Harris, to put in whatever candidate they want next, because they know that Joe Biden is not going to willingly choose not to run. So for me, like I said, this is almost just a big waste of time. I'm more interested in hearing, from Tara, who was a victim of sexual harassment from a sitting president. I mean, I know that this is, gossip and stuff, but to me, that is a pretty good indication of Joe Biden's character. And there's going to be some people in the chat say, oh, Tara's lying. But for me, I don't believe Tara's lying. And when I look at the actions of his son with those women and filming it and being a sexual deviant, I honestly do believe that is genetic. And I know there's going to be somebody who's like, oh, well, that's not genetic. Well, alcoholism is genetic. People will say that. So him being a sexual pervert, his son is a sexual pervert. So I'm not surprised that Joe Biden's a sexual pervert.
Harry, do you want to respond to Alex?
Yeah, that was a lot. I just want to quickly say one thing first. So, Catherine, I like your analysis, but I also somewhat disagree that I think that the crimes are the same. Because in terms when you read the actual statutes surrounding classified documents, for Biden to be considered guilty, or Trump or anybody, you'd have to show intent and gross negligence.
But I'll let you answer that point. But just Alex's point that was made a couple of times by Alex, if you don't mind me interrupting, Harry, about the Democratic Party, and I think we had another panelist say it's the deep state wanting Biden out for 2025. You strongly disagree with this. You actually did respond to this. You disagreed with this. Before giving you back the mic, Andrew, about that particular point, I'd love your take on it. How plausible is it, before going back to Harry? And then Alex, feel free to respond.
You're asking me if
the Democratic Party does want a Biden out.
I don't really find that. I don't really find that plausible right now. It just. I think the folks who are saying that are attributing a lot of power and a lot of competence to folks who are either not that powerful or not that competent. If the Democratic Party doesn't want Biden to be the nominee in 2024, there are ways to make that clear and make it possible for someone to successfully challenge him. But you're just not. It's not realistic that there's this behind the scenes machinations by shadowy forces. It's just.
I disagree, Andrew, and you know what, with that point, and I'll tell you why. Because you just saw what happened to Cuomo. You just saw an example of how the DNC operates, and the RNC, I'm sure, operates. I can only speak to my own experience as a Democratic operative that worked in congressional races and worked for members of Congress, and I can tell you right now, they do not want Joe Biden to run. They do not want.
So Tara and Alex, why? Where do you get that information from? Is it just a feeling, like you think that, or is there any particular indicators?
No, it's
Go,
sort of it's two things. It's two things.
Go
It's
Tara and then
things
Alex.
that's been-
Go Tara.
Okay, it's been said. The quiet part's been kind of said out loud by certain high-ranking members of Congress. You had Jeffries, who also mentioned that my investigation should be taken seriously. They're facing congressional hearings over the Hunter Biden laptop. Now, the Democrats have tried to, make it about Hunter Biden having drug issues, whatever. It has nothing to do with that. It has nothing to do with his naked pictures. What it has to do with is the emails and the economic corruption and the political and the abuse of power when Joe Biden was vice president. Also, bear in mind, when I'm going to say something in this space that some people know, but not everyone knows, there are other women who have not come forward who are afraid. And there's also a photo. There's also things behind the scenes happening that if there's a congressional hearing, I won't be alone. There'll be other people coming forward. Part of the records that are in the University of Delaware probably house some of the other complaints, because there's other complaints against Biden, not just mine. And I'm not, it's just that the way I was discredited and the way I was publicly dragged made it frightening. So like in Cuomo's case, what you saw was an AG investigation that allowed victims to come forward more safely. They still got hassled in the press, but
to go back to the point, like Alex, I'll go to you.
They don't want the congressional hearings. Is what I'm saying. The DNC. That's what I'm trying to say, Mario.
Understood.
The powers behind the Democratic Party do not want a messy congressional hearing that's going to expose corruption, probably from both parties, about Ukraine and about other things.
But I think they wouldn't want it because it's also bad. It's also bad press. Like they could just not want it just because it's bad press for the Democratic Democratic Party, for Biden. Maybe they don't want it.
They want a clean and easy out, and this is the easiest way to get him out. Force him out.
About documents. People are bored with documents, so they're not.
I just want to make this one point though, because we're talking about declassified documents, and you can look up a thing called Operation Mockingbird, and this was in the '60s, where the CIA said that they have agents in every single form of television, radio, and film, and this was in the '60s. So the idea that they don't have that today, you'd be an idiot to think that. So my point is, just look how the mainstream media is talking about Joe Biden. Look at Joe Scarborough today had a viral clip talking about how Joe Biden lied about marching the civil rights. When the mainstream media turns on Joe Biden, that's how you know that they're being told. You want to say, oh, quote unquote, deep state. It may not be a deep state, but it only takes, somebody high up in this media company to say, hey, we're going to change the narrative. So that person only needs to be told from one person. So it doesn't take a whole team of evil people. It takes a few important, powerful people to change the narrative. So if you look at the mainstream media and now that they're not defending Joe Biden, this is the same mainstream media that covered up the laptop, that did not talk about it, that said it was Russian disinformation. As a matter of fact, these are the same people that said in 2016 the whole election was fake, and that was Russian.
Wait, are you saying, Alex, you're saying that the media is not covering it up? Because they're not covering it up, but they are defending him. So I wouldn't say that they're not,
I would disagree. I would say that the way that they defended him on other stuff, the way that they're defending him now is much less. I mean, you can go look at
Well, CNN actually, just to add to that, they actually ran a headline on this today, going after the Hunter or the story from back in 1993.
Catherine hasn't looked, Nick. These guys haven't looked. These liberals haven't looked. Go watch your liberal networks. They're all calling out Joe Biden right now because that's
he's basically done. He's a pariah at this point, and people are calling out how he is not answering questions from journalists about literally anything. They're questioning his ability to lead. When you have mainstream networks, the people who defended him, who would die to destroy Trump, who are calling out Biden right now, it tells you something, right? It tells you that they're done with him, they're finished with him. That
So
he
who's
has
the
other
Democrat candidate that they want to replace him with? I don't see
Gavin
any.
Newsom out of
Gavin?
California will be the nominee in 2024.
Gavin
I
Newsom.
disagree. I
Newsom,
think there's
100%.
too much being made out and trying to replace Biden. I don't think that's the case. Personally, I would like to see somebody younger, but I would happily vote for Biden as a Democrat.
Would you vote for Newsom?
I think.
Would you vote for Newsom?
Yeah. Would I vote for? I would vote for Newsom over Trump. I would have voted for Newsom over DeSantis. If it was another Republican, I'd have to consider it.
Right.
Do people not? I
Alex,
thought people didn't like him very much because of what he's done in California. Even
he's
Democrats.
loved in California. It depends. I mean, who you
Is
talk
he?
to. Like, liberals love him.
I would.
My liberal friends don't.
I would take
They
Buttigieg.
probably-
Buttigieg is my
They
favorite.
suffer under his rule.
Right,
Alex, what do you think was the catalyst for this? What do you think was the catalyst for these media organizations actually the tide turning on Joe Biden?
Well, I mean, I just think it's the public opinion, or they know what's going to happen. They know that the public opinion is going to change, so they want to be ahead of it. I mean, it's just self-preservation.
But why would the public opinion change? Definitely not because of these documents. It doesn't seem big.
No, it's because
you even
his
said
inability to lead, right? He's a bad leader. I mean, under him, the price of eggs has gone up 700%.
Yeah, so has the
But
price
yeah,
of
but
eggs
this is
gone up?
the
gas has gone up, and he's
yeah,
denying that.
but Ian, but how I made a tweet about it, like how much can you? I know the public, the voters will blame the president, but it's only so much control the president has.
It doesn't really matter if
I
he is
may
directly
interject
responsible
on
for it,
this,
right?
we're close to World War III. He's
Yeah.
made Ukraine this thing, and we are close to having a war against Russia. And I didn't vote for Trump, and I'm not here to advocate for him at all, but he didn't get us close to World War III. Joe Biden has. Biden administration has.
Tara,
And
did you
people are
vote?
frightened.
Did you vote?
Has.
Realistically, like
No, you can't say Putin has. See, here's the thing. Trump kept Putin at bay. I think we can all agree on that, because under Trump, Putin couldn't really predict him. You don't want to mess with a guy like Trump. Like, you don't know what he's going to do. He's going to threaten to nuke you, and you're like, maybe he's not bluffing, right? With Biden's like, well, there's nothing wrong with a tiny invasion.
I will agree with that, Ian, actually, because I do think that that Trump was a bit of an unpredictable deterrent, and Biden pretty much did say we're not going to do anything. So yeah,
exactly, it's a green light, and he's doing the same thing with Taiwan and China, right? He's like, oh, we only have time for one war right now, and what does that signal to China? China hears that, and they're like, oh, they're probably not going to oppose if we do something with Taiwan. And furthermore, and this is something that not a lot of people are talking about, his little ban on China having semiconductors, that's actually affecting Taiwan in a way that is so negative that Taiwan has joined forces with China to complain about it. They're pissed off about it because it's hurting their economy. And if anything, it has driven China and Taiwan closer together. Now, you might be under the impression that Taiwan fucking hates China. Maybe the president hates China, but there are a significant, portion of the Taiwanese public, as well as the people in their Congress, who want to unify with China. And right now, they're getting the upper hand because they're seeing that Biden is screwing them.
Well, I respect what you're saying.
Right.
Ian. I've got friends in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs that are one really good friend over in Taipei, and there are definitely some people in Taiwan who are glad to do that. I would say that the inertia actually has been turning back the other way, and you've got both major parties there who differed on unifying economically with Taiwan, who have radically changed that now. And so I think that, but I think the bigger thing with Biden and the concern, I don't think the Democrats are trying to undermine him, but I will say that if they are, the bigger concern, but before, by the way, we might bring Phil Klein in at the right time, Mario, but the bigger thing is, I think that Democrats do understand that Joe Biden's not going to be able to hide in the basement this time. Like, he is going to have to go out. And they know that every single time he is out talking, that it is always a risk. I mean, it's like, it's way beyond just the occasional misstated thing. He is mumbling and bumbling on a regular basis. And with no COVID excuse, there's no way that he can run a media campaign, because you have to be able to successfully make your case to the American people as part of the process of becoming president. And he's just not capable of doing it. So if there's any reason, I think that's the primary motivation amongst these other things you're saying as well.
So Tom, you've had your hand up. Go ahead, man.
There's like a million things before Tom speaks. I just want to say there's like a million things that Biden has said very recently that the White House has had to officially walk back. The State Department has had to walk back his statements on support.
But that's happened. That's
or even
happened
lack
for
of
Trump.
support
That's
for
happened with
Ukraine.
Trump as well, and I think it has happened
No,
with
no, no, no.
previous
Actually,
presidents.
it hasn't. It hasn't been walked. Like Trump's office never walked back to things that he said.
Yes, they have.
Anything that he said went. No, not to the point like this. Not, like Biden, he goes out there and he says that, you know what, masks are necessary if the pandemic is over. He literally said the pandemic is over. And then his office, like 2 days later, says actually the pandemic is not over. And Biden misspoke. Like, that
Yeah,
is
but
insane.
I think we've had similar instances with Trump, especially during COVID. But I will go look. I could be wrong there,
Not to
but just
this
before,
extent, not to this extent.
before,
You had federal organizations like the CDC saying that Trump is not entirely correct on this and that he meant something else. You have had that, and that, you can argue that that is him not coordinating his messaging properly with the organizations under him. But with Biden, it's the White House that is saying, oh, he actually misspoke and that the pandemic is still on. When you have the president being contradicted by his own people, the people who work under him directly, his own press people are contradicting him and saying that no, actually he's wrong. Like, that tells you that he's not really in charge, and they don't want a guy like that they cannot even have a cohesive brand to go with. That's a problem for them.
before going to Tom and Harry, Jim, quickly, Alex, do you like for a statement, for example, blaming Biden for the Ukraine war, and even Catherine agreed with that point. Like, how causation versus correlation? Like, how do we know for sure? Like, it's a fair statement to make. It's plausible, but we can't treat it as fact. I just
the issue is that it doesn't.
I just go Alex.
No, hold on.
The issue is that it doesn't matter. The issue is the perception of it. The perception is what matters.
Well, I don't know if this
Alex.
answers your question, but when you look at our conflict, you look at the way that Joe Biden left Afghanistan, where people were hanging off of planes, and just the way that we left there. There's going to be people here, obviously, that aren't conspiracy theorists like me, that I believe the military-industrial complex needs a new war constantly. There's a guy, five-star General Smedley Butler, but he says war is a racket. So I just think it's very easy to pivot from the war in the Middle East to now that we're training Ukrainian soldiers at Fort Bragg in Oklahoma to be able to fight the Russians. That just, basically starts World War III, in my opinion. Whether we're fighting a war by proxy, like Tara said earlier, I'm anti-war. I believe as human beings, we should care more about the border between Texas and Mexico than the border between Russia and Ukraine. And I'm in Dallas, and I see people, and I've had friends that have died of drug overdose deaths. So for me, it's like, listen, if our president actually cared about America, he would actually use some of our military resources to protect American citizens. But instead, they're using those military resources to benefit the military-industrial complex, Halliburton, Raytheon, by starting a war. And listen, we sell these weapons. Literally, we fund. I just want to say this, not just with BlackRock, but before the war in the Middle East, is that we actually funded the Taliban. We gave the Taliban the weapons to be able to shoot down Russian helicopters. So we fought a proxy war there. And then guess what? We ended up being in a 20-year war with the Middle East that we lost. So for me, just from what I see, us in proxy wars are not very good. And so next thing you know, and this is just total speculation. We could be in a war with Ukraine in 20 years if it happens anything like it happened in the movie Charlie Wilson's War. So I'm just saying, we have a military-industrial complex that does not care about the American people, does not care about the taxpayers. We don't have universal health care in America, but we have enough cruise missiles to kill the entire population. So I'm just...
Right. So Alex,
you know what, Mario? Can I just say I agree with
before that. So before you go, Tara, just quickly before you go, Tara, Alex, I saw one of your videos in which you had a gentleman. It was a great video, very entertaining. You had a gentleman that went and there was making statements like, why we're paying for the war in Ukraine when we have people starving on our streets. But like, isn't that simplifying a more complex topic? Like, I think if you start looking at the
geopolitics is very nuanced. But listen, when there's people struggling here in America and we're giving hundreds of billions of dollars to Ukraine, that's it. I mean, listen, I even though you say that, I'm considered far right. I believe that we should have taxes. I believe we should have some sort of socialized medicine. But what's happening is all of our tax money is being misappropriated by all these people in Washington, D.C. So that's the problem. So if they actually wanted to help people here in America, instead of sending $100 billion to Ukraine to fight a proxy war, for a war that basically at the beginning of it, all they had to do was say that Ukraine was not going to join NATO and that the Donbass region was autonomous. You could basically choose to be Ukrainian or Russian. That's very simple. And because of that, because we are globalists, because we have a one world order that cares more about NATO and more about our participation in global groups, now we are fighting a proxy war with the Ukraine to go after Vladimir Putin. And these same people in NATO are the same people that buy all their energy from this evil dictator, Vladimir Putin. So that's why they're going to have energy and gas shortages. So the same people that are making those decisions, if those are the people that are running geopolitics or geopolitical decisions, they're all idiots, and they need to simplify it and become America first and use some of that money here on Americans.
Like you, and you just
Right.
really
This is Tom.
oversimplified it, Alex, too.
Well, you know what? I have to
before
say, I agree with him. I have to go in a minute, and I just wanted to thank you, Mario, again for having this spaces. And I wanted to give a shout out to Tom, who's doing really great work to try with his Judicial Watch, and I wanted to thank him. And Ian, I read your writing, and it is amazing. I love your articles, so please keep it up. I just want to leave on this thought. I love that I was able to have people that agreed to disagree. I respect Harry, even though I don't agree with him. And I wanted to say that I think in a few years, this will be revealed as one of the biggest money laundering scams, the Ukraine, the proxy war against Russia that we've ever experienced. And I think it will reveal to be that, you know, Raytheon and all of them have made almost $1 trillion since last February in profits. So as long as war is this profitable, there'll be endless wars, like Alex said. Actually, Julian Assange said that and warned us. Eisenhower warned us. Kennedy tried to warn us, and we need to listen.
And I do believe that Donald Trump actually said to the NATO, the head of NATO, that this was going to end up being an issue if Germany kept relying on Russia to buy energy.
On these points, before going to Tom, Harry and Ed, there's a lot of points made by Alex regarding the Ukraine war, and you guys wanted to respond. So I'll let you jump in quickly, and then we'll go to Tom and Phil.
Yeah, and I just wanted, Alex keeps bringing up the whole drug overdose thing, and I agree, drug overdoses in America, they're terrible. But drug overdoses have gone up under every president since, I believe, Ronald Reagan. They went up under Bush, under Clinton, under both Bushes, under Trump, and now they're going up under Biden. So to say it's Biden's fault that drug overdose is going up,
No,
I think that's a little short-sighted.
Stop it. It's not his fault for them going up. It's him not doing anything to stop it. And
Exactly. It's like he can do something about it, right? He can do something different, and yet he's not doing anything about it. In fact, he's focused entirely away from it. Like he shifted focuses away from it. Under Trump, there was at least this massive campaign to tackle fentanyl. Under Biden, there is zero.
No, there is.
effort.
Biden's doing a lot to tackle fentanyl.
So why is he allowing
your opinion is just that he needs to do more at the border to tackle fentanyl?
Yeah, because they're the leading cause of
that's
it.
the story.
Like
no,
Biden,
but
like
fentanyl
under Trump,
comes
he
in
wanted to build a
many
wall,
other
and he
ways
also
than
wanted to
just to the
destroy the
border.
cartels. He wanted to designate the cartels as terrorist organizations, and this was something that was shot down under Biden. Why didn't Biden go after the cartels? I mean, ask yourself that question. Right now, we're seeing footage from Mexico where the cartels are going to war with the Mexican military. Why isn't the U.S. military there? It's right by the border. It is in northern Mexico. The U.S. military could very easily bomb the shit out of these people with the permission of the Mexican government.
We're going to bomb Mexico because of the drug cartels.
Like, listen. I said with the permission of the Mexican government. They have asked for help.
Let me make this point, Ian. They're bombing people in the Ukraine because of the Donbass region because they want to join NATO. So to bomb somebody because we're stopping the drug crisis, that actually makes sense. But instead, they're killing children in the Ukraine because of the Donbass region, a region that 99% of the people in the world could not even pick out on a map. So you're telling me what is justified murder? Give me a freaking break. They drop bombs.
I mean, there's more to Ukraine than just that, though. It's all about geopolitics. And do you really want, if Russia gets Ukraine, what do you think they're going to do next? Just sit back and not do anything? Or do you think they try and take Poland or try and take another country?
Okay, if they're trying to take Poland, why didn't they take it already?
Because they're in the UN.
They're going.
How are they going to take Poland when it's a part of NATO?
Ukraine
is not a part of NATO.
agreed
They're not going to
join
invade
NATO.
Ukraine. I mean, they're not going to invade Poland. Yeah, they're not going to do anything with NATO. Like they know that would be a death sentence for everybody.
So are you saying we should just sit back and let them take Ukrainian? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, honestly, yeah, I could
It's not
care
the
less
war
if
to
they
fight.
took Ukraine, because what do the Ukrainians want? I mean, literally, they want us to fund their never-ending war. They need to come to peace. They need to not join NATO, and then Russia will not kill
But
them.
you say they need to come to peace, but
They're not part
I
of
know
NATO,
they're not,
Alex.
but they're afraid of
So,
them
you know,
joining
That's the
NATO.
point. Yeah,
And
they're
that's
not part of
why.
NATO, so there's no reason to even back them up.
That's why.
Allies,
this is kind of a
it's like
ridiculous,
America's
this
acting
whole
like the
NATO
world police.
narrative.
Here's the problem with America, right? America's acting like it's the world police, and yet it can't even police its own borders. That is weird to me. Why is America involved in the war in Saudi Arabia against Yemen? Like, what's the deal with that? Oh, it's resources.
Hey, Ian, do you think Putin's a good guy?
No,
I don't
Putin's not a
care
good
what
guy.
Putin thinks.
No, just answer the question. Is he a good guy, Ian?
Do I think he's a good guy? No, I think he's a politician.
Putin killed
No, but
journalists.
do you think he's a
Nobody.
do you think he's a dictator?
Alex,
Or
it's
do you
not
think
hard
he's
to
a
tell.
murderer?
He's a
I
murderer.
don't think he's a
Poison
dictator.
people?
I think he's a politician. I think he's a moderate conservative who's doing what he thinks is best for his people. You may disagree with that. I may disagree with
But
that.
I mean,
it
he's
doesn't
a
really
he's
matter,
a
does
he's
it?
a murderer.
He's a murderer.
He's a
Ian,
murderer.
How is he a
Alex,
murderer?
Alex,
How
jump
are
in,
you
Alex.
making a personal judgment of the man?
Alex.
Ian,
When
call
he
him a murderer.
is
Call him what
leading
he
his
is, Ian.
country?
Call him
You
a
can say
murderer.
whatever you want about Putin, but at least
Guys,
he's working in the
Why do
interest
you
of
refuse
Russians.
to call him a
Can you
murderer?
argue? Can you argue, like honestly, can you argue that Biden is working in the interest of Americans, or is he working in the
Ian,
interest of
Ian,
his
call
people?
him.
So guys, Ian, everyone else, stop muting everyone. So Alex, I'll let you jump in, and Harry, then Ed
I'm
and
not
Ian.
muting everyone, by the way. That
Yeah,
was
no,
me.
I think it's Nick. Yeah, go ahead,
I mean,
Alex.
I'm just guys, like once again, I think we're just kind of, like I said earlier, we're circumcising an ant. We're talking about that. These are.
Did you say? Hold on. Did you say circumcising
Yes,
an
it's
ant?
just pointless. Like, we're just really spinning the wheels here. Listen, I don't want Ukrainians to die. I don't want Russians to die. Vladimir Putin, journalists that speak out against him, he will kill them. So he's not a good guy. But that doesn't, just because Putin is a bad guy, that doesn't make Vladimir Zelensky a good guy. The guy plays the piano with his penis, which I actually like. That's one of the things I like about Vlad Zelensky. Everything else about him sucks. His Vogue coverage. He can be on a Zoom call.
What is that objectively terrible about
Because
Zelensky,
he's
Alex?
in a war right now, and every single second I turn around, he's on a Zoom call at the Golden Globes, or he's on a cover of Vogue.
Because he's trying, isn't that his job though, as a politician, like as the representative of his country,
His job is
to
not
get
continue a war.
support for his country,
His job
to
should
get
be to
funding and
find
support
peace.
for his country? That is his job.
His job should be to establish peace with the Russians. It's as simple as
Ian,
that.
call
This is an
Putin a
endless
murderer.
war where no one
How
will
do you
win.
get peace with the Russians who've attacked? Like, this is kind of a ridiculous assertion that people keep repeating. I mean, I'm for peace, but what the Russians want is like they had peace. They took a piece of land already, and a few years later they went and attacked again, right? So this idea that you just give them another piece of land and then they come back, and so they attack again, they get rewarded for it. Like, is that it?
Yeah, it's bad foreign policy. Like, what? We just going to give them a Donbass region that has crucial cities? What? It's terrible foreign policy.
Listen, you guys are trying to dictate foreign policy. There are glaring problems here in America. Can anybody here on this chat not say America is trending in the wrong direction? I know Harry's so insane. He's actually.
But Alex, can't you say that any year, any time since America was
I would say
incepted?
it's worse now than it's ever been. Like I was trying to make the point earlier after 9/11. 9/11 was the worst thing ever, but at least the country came together. People loved one another. We were at our weakest point, but we came together. After COVID, this country is more split and more divided and more filled with hate and despair. And I don't think it's irreparable. I don't necessarily think there's going to be a civil war, but just the direction and the automatic hate that people have for each other. And listen, Harry, I actually don't hate you just because you're a liberal or whatever. I don't just judge a person totally by their political ideologies. But sadly, in today's society, the instant gratification, the amount of internet pornography that children are on, I have very little hope for the future because everybody is suffering from either they're a veteran that comes back with PTSD, or you give yourself PTSD by being on freaking social media, 28 hours of the day. So I'm just saying, I think the future is very bleak. And we need to help Americans here in America. And you guys want to say, oh, we have to worry about our foreign policy across the world. Where our foreign policy should be that we don't let, Mexico cartels just flood in fentanyl like it's no big deal. And they won't even spend $5 billion on a wall here in America, just the most basic thing. But they'll give $100 billion to the Ukraine. So our priorities are incorrect. It's not a right wing. It's not a left wing thing. It's our priorities are screwed up, in my opinion.
I think the division has been here long before COVID. I mean, I think most people would agree on that. As for fentanyl, yeah. Let me finish. Let me finish, and then you respond. Can I
but I want to
finish?
make this point. You say the division was worse now. I've never seen people in grocery stores fighting because they've never worn a mask. Do you really mean that statement? You're telling me that you don't think things are more now?
But do you think the masks highlight an existing polarization, or is it an increase in polarization?
It's the MAGA hat for the liberals. So yes, so you got the guys in the MAGA hats. You got
oh my God!
It's a fact. Listen,
if
a pair of Levi's can't stop a fart,
the division was here.
Go ahead.
This is
the division was here before COVID. COVID just kind of brought a lot of
got it,
that
Tom. Yeah. So Tom, Tom, you've been waiting for a while. I'll let you jump in.
You know, I want to go back. I know this conversation's gone off a little bit in various directions, but you know, some of it's kind of related. It's kind of fundamental corruption in the way we govern ourselves, and the refusal to kind of deal forthrightly with that. You know, I'm probably the only person, at least among these speakers, who still listens to terrestrial radio, but they've got commercials on radio. Did you know that? For financial products and stuff. And one of the things they say is that at the end of the product commercial is that they say in the speeded up voice, past performance is no indication of future performance, right? Actually, that's the exact rule that we should follow for politics. What's happened in the past is likely, absent extraordinary circumstances, will happen in the future. And so when it comes to Biden and whether he's running again and what's going to happen, well, what's happened in the past? He's the incumbent. He's going to run again. What do they do to protect a left-wing incumbent who's so compromised corruptly like Biden? You try to rig the system, and you do whatever you can to protect him by either by abusing and targeting his enemies. So they needed to protect the special counsel that they were trying to use to hound and jail Trump. That became nearly impossible once they lost control of the story that Biden had done everything that they were accusing Trump to do. So what's the easiest way to deal with that? It became impossible to allow a special counsel for Trump and not for Biden. So you throw one in for Biden. It allows the special counsel to continue for Trump. And so the two nominees are going to be treated by one, a special counsel who is notoriously anti-Trump, targeting Biden, and another special counsel who is anti-Trump, targeting Trump. So that works out well, and it certainly fits in with the pattern in this city, which is to protect those who are of the left and the Democratic Party, while targeting generally people like Trump and his supporters. And you know, going back to the Ukraine issue, you know, I think it's a much more simple than it ought to be because of the corruption here in Washington, D.C. First of all, you've got the left that doesn't know what to do in Ukraine. You know, presumably you don't want the Russians to win, right? And you would quickly bring up the necessary equipment or send it in to make the fight over as quickly as possible, which is actually not what the Biden administration did. Every new equipment transfer is like they're digging into their pocket looking for a nickel. So as a result, you've had a war, I think, that's gone on longer than it needed to. And one of the reasons they don't want the Russians necessarily to lose, while also not wanting them to win, is because, going back to the files, going back to Biden, because they're compromised. Russia has information on Biden. Ukraine, Russia allied Ukraine, the Russia segment of the Ukraine elites has information on Biden. He's compromised. So he's doing the minimum necessary in many ways to keep the Ukrainians in the fight. And of course, the big media doesn't want to talk about the fact that his son is compromised. And the evidence is he's compromised too, because of the 10% for the big guy RICO operation they had running. So as a result, we've got a war going on that otherwise may never have happened but for Biden's corruption, and is continuing beyond where it could have been, where I think it should have continued because of this corruption.
That statement. So you're saying, but we can't say things like the war wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for Biden's corruption. Like I'm
I
not,
mean,
I'm not
it's his
disagreeing with.
opinion, right? His opinion.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean,
fair, fair.
I don't even necessarily agree with Tom here. Like, I think that the reason why they're protracting this war to go on for as long as possible is because it's
Who's
benefiting
protracting? You think that the West is the
West,
US?
yeah, but not the West, but the State Department, right? The United States is protracting the war by making it go on for as long as possible instead of introducing game-changing mechanics that would turn the tide in, say, maybe Ukraine's favor, or maybe calling for a truce, like an immediate one, telling Zelensky, hey, no more guns, no more free stuff. You need to go to the table and talk to Putin and work this thing out peacefully, right? They're doing neither of these things. They're just protracting it. And this is something that General Milley has talked about. He says that he expects this thing to go on for years, possibly decades, that this could be the next Afghanistan. And now the reason why they are looking at it this way, and this is my opinion, right, is because there is a huge financial incentive to keep the war going on for as long as possible, to destroy as much of Ukraine's infrastructure as possible, because BlackRock is invested in this. BlackRock, as you all know, or maybe you don't know, is the largest, and the world's largest asset management firm. And they have just very recently, just a few weeks ago, signed an agreement with Zelensky to be the #1 provider of the rebuilding effort for Ukraine. What this means is potentially $1 trillion for BlackRock in Ukraine over the next 20 years. This is what we're talking about. It's all US taxpayer dollars that are going there. Europe will be paying for it as well. And so they want to keep this whole thing going for as long as possible. Doesn't matter if even Russia benefits from this, because Russia is, by the way, benefiting from all these worthless sanctions that are actually helping its economy, because Europe is buying all of its resources, all of its oil from Russia, but they're doing it through proxies like China, like India, and yes, Turkey. So all these other countries are sort of benefiting
let me
from
be
it.
clear, Mario. The Biden's corruption obviously wasn't the only reason for the war in Russia. I suggest it's a significant contributing factor that was present, that motivated, or was another excuse, or certainly if Putin's trying to evaluate what the blowback's going to be from an invasion, and he sees a compromised Biden, with compromised in part by Russia because of their monies for him and people like him, he's thinking, well, I know how this guy is run.
Tom,
I know what this guy's number
specific?
is, so I can take this risk that I otherwise would not have taken in other situations.
Well,
Can you be specific as to those very specific ways in which he is compromised? Because you can't say, you used the statement, for example, the 10%, and someone earlier in the space had debunked that and said that somebody who was the person to whom the email was addressed, or who wrote
I don't know
he's
if that
compromised
was
because of Burisma. He's compromised because of the $4.5 to $5 million he got.
But we already know
Hunter
about
got
Burisma,
from.
right?
Hold on, I'm
So-
not finished. Also received from the oligarch's widow, the mayor of Moscow's oligarch widow, who gave basically gobs of money for no good reason to the Hunter operation. We have evidence that all that money was for, in part, the benefit of Joe Biden while he was vice president. Look, we had documents when Biden rushed to Ukraine in January of 2017, just before Trump came in. Judicial Watch obtained documents that the Obama State Department officials were highlighting how the Russians were mocking Biden coming to Ukraine to fix corruption. And what was the language the Obama State Department official said to, I think it was to Yovanovitch, the infamous ambassador? Burisma is the gift that keeps on giving, and how they were talking about how the Russia media was trolling Biden on this. The Obama gang knew what Biden had done was a national security issue, and it didn't disappear 5 years later when Russia was calculating whether to invade Ukraine to try to destroy that country's sovereignty.
Yeah,
Well,
so
and
Alex, let me
segue
ask you
into-
a question here, real quick, on Ukraine here, because obviously you have a pretty solid opinion on this. There have been a lot of accusations, especially in the when it comes to Hunter Biden, as well as even the SBF situation, right? When it came to funneling money from
SBF. But SBF situation. Okay, sorry. Continue.
Well, no. There is a relation here, because there is.
There is. I'm just saying.
The Bank of Ukraine.
True. There is. Yeah, I'm not saying there isn't, because we had the insiders.
They handled all of Ukraine's crypto. So if you were sending cryptocurrency to Ukraine, FTX was handling it.
But there hasn't been any evidence for that. That's just an allegation that's been made.
No. There is actual evidence of it because they put out a press release. The Bank of Ukraine put out a press release saying that FTX is handling all the donations in form of crypto into Ukraine. This was something that was done in April.
Okay, so I'll let Nick, before Nick, you continue asking a question, Piotr, welcome on stage. Before having Nick ask a question, oh yeah, the newsletter, just everyone pinned above, make sure you sign up for it where we sum up all the points. I need to keep mentioning it. But yeah, Nick, I'll let you ask the question to Alex, and then I see Jim and Piotr with their hands up.
Okay, all right, yeah. So in addition to that, Alex, there were similar allegations with the Hunter Biden situation. When it comes to that possible corruption, money flowing back from Ukraine into Hunter Biden's pockets, is that something that we should be concerned about?
No, we shouldn't even look into it. No, everything the mainstream media tells us about the Ukraine is exactly correct. So obviously, we should look into it. I mean, gosh, we know that Joe Biden even said that he had to do a quid pro quo. He has the people in there, and listen, they have political leverage on the current president, or else we wouldn't be so indebted to this war. And I know you're like, oh, you're a conspiracy theorist. Yes, that's speculation. But when you look at his son, like I said, Hunter Biden became the biggest liability that Joe Biden ever had. And that's what a lot of these other countries are able to use against him. That's what China uses against him. You don't think they have a bunch of hooker and porno type stuff of Hunter Biden? So, yes, it's obvious that we've been involved with Ukraine for much longer than 2022.
Keeping in mind. So just to add to what you're saying, right? It's worth keeping in mind. It's not just one laptop that was lost. It was several laptops, and one of the laptops that got taken from Hunter Biden was stolen by a prostitute who worked for the Russian mob. And so there is a laptop out there that is somewhere with the Russian mob right now. We don't know where it is exactly, but that is a thing that is known. So that's worth pointing out. That's a different laptop than the one that we have right now. So that's an interesting point.
And so I just really, guys, it does not make sense that we're giving the war in Ukraine this much attention. I know people try to act like they really care about Ukrainians. Nobody cares about Ukrainians. I mean, people want to virtue signal that.
Well,
I don't want Ukrainians to fight, so I don't want to sound insensitive. I'm saying what I'm saying is everybody has Ukrainian flag in their bio is the most ingenuine bullcrap that I've ever seen. So listen, if anybody can't see that this is just the zeitgeist, this is the collective consciousness of society, it's mass formation hypnosis.
Why, Alex? Why would you make that statement about Alex, people not caring about?
Absolute statement, please, Alex. It's getting a little bit ridiculous.
That's a statement. It's a pretty extreme statement, Alex. Like, not people not. I think you're making a good point. Just about people not caring about Ukraine. Maybe there's some people. Maybe that it becomes.
Let me clarify.
They don't care.
Go ahead, Alex. Go ahead, Alex.
Care. I'm sure there are people out there that are.
True. I think not everyone. Yeah, true. Fair. I get your point.
Listen, I care. I don't want Ukrainians to die. I mean that 100%. I'm just saying it's a very superficial support when everybody's wearing a Ukrainian shirt. Everybody's putting in their bio. I'm just saying in general, I don't really think they care. I think it's political theater. That's what I'm saying. And of course, if you really care about it, I can't tell you how you feel, and I believe you. So I'm just saying.
Kony 2012. Remember when everybody cared about the children in Africa? Kony 2012. It was a hashtag, and like
Ian, what aboutism is that we?
So Alex, hold on, Piotr. Hold on, Alex. I'll let you finish your point.
I'm just saying it's very superficial support. It's not. It's carried on by the mainstream media to get us to, cheerlead for Vladimir Zelensky. Like I said, he's constantly on the cover of Vogue. He's constantly on every Zoom meeting, on everything. Every celebrity's going over there. Every politician, Eye Patch McCain is able to go over there. Nancy Pelosi can fly first class. So I'm just saying, if all these guys can sit and they can have lunch with Zelensky and get their photo op, and Ben Stiller can go there, and Sean Penn can start crying, I don't like all that Hollywood stuff. To me, I think that most of those Hollywood people are pedophile freaks, and I know that sounds crazy, but I don't really care. So I'm just telling you, I believe what's happening in the Ukraine is the biggest waste of American resources, and it's the biggest waste of geopolitical resources, because as human beings, we should be able to come to an agreement about the border. We can't even come to an agreement about the border between Texas and Mexico. So that's why I'm frustrated. I'm just frustrated with what our priorities are here in America when people are struggling. So listen, I'm not trying to be insensitive to people in Ukraine. God bless your soul. I don't want any of them to die, but everybody putting a Ukrainian flag in their bio is the fakest garbage I've ever seen in my life.
How about the argument, Alex? I've got a question for you. How about the argument that if Ukraine falls, it increases the risk of a nuclear conflict? Because what will Russia do next? And Poland is a NATO country. Wouldn't you say, like, the border between the U.S. and Mexico, it's closer to home, but it's not as serious as a proxy war between the two
Well,
superpowers.
like I said, let me put on my tinfoil hat. I mean, I believe it's trauma-based mind control. The American media and government wants to make you afraid that Russia is going to be able to use a nuclear bomb and kill you instantly. Because once they have that power over you, they can control us, like literally like mice. So when they use Putin as this big bad boogeyman that's going to drop a nuclear bomb, according to history, we're the only people to ever drop a nuclear bomb. So they want you to live in fear of Vladimir Putin. And I'm not saying Vladimir Putin.
Well, they want you to live in fear of something, I would add. I mean, during the beginning of the Obama administration, we had the Great Reset. It was the idiot Republicans that were causing unnecessary discord with the Russians. And then, of course, the Democrats came in by Hillary Clinton, who was on the take of the Russian oligarchs and that regime. So they changed their policy until it became politically convenient to tie the Russians to Republicans. This virtually has, I think there are significant geopolitical issues here. But if anyone thinks the Biden administration cares about them in any comprehensive or honest way, Alex has got it down 100%. They are managing a political scandal in Ukraine, which is they allowed the Russians to invade Ukraine on their watch. Biden's personally compromised by it. And now they've got this geopolitical crisis as a result of their incompetence. And secondly, it is somewhat convenient to have all the eyes focused on Ukraine while there's a 5 million person invasion, the largest humanitarian catastrophe, the largest human trafficking operation in the history of humanity going on our southern border in a way that is going to change America, that we are going to lose the republic unless we get a hold of what we're doing there and fix it.
Okay,
Well,
so
you know
I
what,
want
it's
to
not
I
as-
jump in at the moment because I was in Ukraine in September, and I think it's okay. So firstly, Alex, nice to meet you. I appreciated your clarity on saying that you don't want people to die. I think that is important because there are some people, not necessarily in here, but there are some people who are like, we don't give a shit about Ukraine, don't give a shit about the war. It's not our war. And I understand that argument. It is, putting national interests and self-interests first is important because at the end of the day, if you don't take care of your own, then, well, you're not going to be much of a state. It's about self-survivalism, and that's the basic theory of international relations. So I agree with you on that front. However, the war is significant because it is arguably the symbolism of autocracy versus democracy. If we don't do anything to curb the threat of Vladimir Putin, if you like the guy, well, then I question your rationality, not you. I mean, one's rationality, right? He is a threat to our interests, not just Americans, the world. He is a threat to the Russian people. He is a threat. And as someone who is half Russian, I can tell you the country has gone backwards under him, particularly in the past 7-8 years, where he has become increasingly paranoid, increasingly driven by ideological extreme values, and in this desire to want to restore Russia to some degree of greater.
Wait, ideologically
presence.
extreme values? Like what exactly? You need to specify what you mean by that.
Well, the belief that the entirety of the Ukrainian state is run by Nazis, I think that's probably a little bit of an overstretch. No, but
beyond that, what values are we talking about? Are we talking about traditional Christian values? Are those ideologically extreme values?
No,
well, Ian, for example,
children to be groomed by
his aren't just
transgender
Christian
people.
values, Ian. His is to make the entire Russian state homophobic to anybody who doesn't.
Homophobic? How exactly are anti-grooming laws
you
homophobic?
can't walk down the street without being
it's not.
Ron DeSantis homophobic for
Ian,
having
have you
the
been to
exact
Russia?
same
Wait. So Ian, you're
have
saying
you been to
Christian
Russia?
values
are
as
the exact same laws in Russia going on right now. So how can you say that it's homophobic to not want your kids to become trans? How is that homophobic?
It's not just anti-trans, Ian. It's not acceptable to be gay. It's not acceptable to.
Anti-grooming law is
It's
an propaganda
anti-Western.
law. Anti-LGBT propaganda is not the same thing as anti-gay. It's not the same thing.
Ian, you're
not
touching at
acceptable.
semantics here, and the point I'm making is, and I
It's
want
not
to bring it back to
semantics.
Ukraine.
No, it's not
It
semantics.
is very much
like
semantics.
if you don't want your
Because
kids
you're
to be
talking,
groomed into
Ian,
becoming
about
trans people,
a
it's not the
state-
same
No,
as saying
because
homophobia.
the
We hate
context-
gays.
So Piotr, yeah. Go ahead,
can I
Piotr. I'll
finish
let you
my
finish your
point?
point, Piotr, and I know Catherine wants
Yeah.
to speak, and I'll let Ian respond. Ian and Alex.
Yeah. Look, so Ian, I'm not going to entertain this point much more. I want to focus on the war itself, not about LGBT politics.
Then why bring it up?
Because you
focus on the war. Okay.
Yeah,
Continue.
Ian. I love a Beatty Ian. He's great. I do like a lot of what you share. I think it's quite funny. But anyway, to the war itself, to Alex's point, this is a difficult decision. This is a difficult balance because either we pull out completely, i.e. supporting Ukraine, and it's likely Russia will just sheerly win through manpower as they did in the Second World War, through what's known as Soviet doctrine, through the sheer overwhelming of the opposition through numbers. It's called total war. Or we continue to supply the Ukrainians with enough arms that they can win it themselves. Short of us going in, i.e. NATO, and attacking the Russians directly, which would lead to World War III, we can't do that. So we're in this difficult situation. Give them nothing or give them arms so that they can fight it themselves. Unfortunately, this takes time, and it leads to the disenfranchisement and distrust in our governments because we think that they're more interested
Do you mind
in
if I
supporting a bunch
respond
of
to that
countries.
exactly?
Alex and Ian, I'll let you respond, guys.
So, you pointed out that the Soviet doctrine was to throw bodies at a problem, and that is true. And that is Ukraine's doctrine at the moment. It is not Russia's doctrine. So it's inaccurate to say that Russia is just simply throwing manpower at it. That's not what they're doing. They're throwing Wagner at it. And Wagner is not officially part of the Russian government. So that you can't really make that argument. Furthermore, they're so, here's the problem. All right. So if you're
Again,
not following the war from the From the Russian perspective, right? From the Russian perspective, they do not want their soldiers to die, which is why they have been so slow and so resistant to putting so many bodies in the front lines. And this is actually a very contentious point for a lot of the war hawks within Russia who are arguing that Putin is simply not doing enough, that he is simply too reticent to send people to die. Right. And so this is actually a point of contention within Russia. They're criticizing Putin for not being hard enough on the war. That this is not a debatable point. This is a fact. This is what's going on in Russia. So the idea that you can simply supply Ukraine with endless weapons so that they can throw bodies at Russia is actually quite disastrous for the Ukrainians because they're doing exactly that. They're sending people to die nonstop. By the thousands, they're dying every single day. In contrast to the Russians, who are dying maybe by a few hundreds a day, and they're Wagner soldiers, right? So there's a big difference.
So Ian, my question to you then is, I've got a question to you and Alex.
Before your question, Piotr, hold on.
Right, the media likes to claim that the Russians are losing tens of thousands of people. That they've lost 1 million soldiers thus far, in order to perpetuate this idea that sending them endless weapons, sending the Ukrainians endless weapons, is actually helping. It's not actually helping anyone.
But it is because they're winning.
No, they're not winning. That's the point.
Are winning.
Jump in, Alex. Jump in, Alex. Guys.
Ian, hang tight, man. The two flashpoints, right? The two biggest flashpoints in the war right now are Bakhmut and Soledar, and they have lost it. The Ukrainians lost it. This is undeniable.
What are you talking about?
Wait, hang on, guys.
The entire war.
Can we get Alex to respond to this first, and then
the idea that they're winning is ridiculous. They're not winning. That's the point.
Their entire counteroffensive has put.
And now you're saying, here's a funny thing.
Stop
the media is saying that
stop muting
areas
me,
that they lost, they weren't necessary. For
no, because the entire.
To begin with. It's kind of silly to say that it wasn't, necessary for Ukrainians
I was in
to win.
Ukraine.
So
Okay,
why
you don't know the
30,000 people die in those places for nothing.
Ian, the front line has moved to Bakhmut because of the counteroffensive by the Ukrainians.
Yes, and it has stalled every other counter.
No, it hasn't stalled. They're resupplying and regrouping. Do you not know the basics of military doctrine?
They lost Bakhmut because they have pulled all
No, they
their
didn't lose
men
it. It's been under.
from their
No,
other
they haven't
front
lost it.
to Bakhmut. They
Jesus
put all,
Christ,
they pulled all the other guys.
Dude, you've got to take.
I'll let guys. Ian, Piotr, guys. I'll let. So I think the point went back and forth. We'll get Alex respond, and then we'll go back to Catherine. I know you've been trying to speak for a while as well.
Real quick, Piotr, let me tell you something. You think America is going to help? Listen, the last time that we funded a proxy war was in the Middle East, and we indirectly created Al Qaeda, the Taliban, whatever you want to call it. We actually gave them weapons to fight the Russians, and then we ended up fighting them in a never-ending war in the Middle East. So if you think America can do anything, first of all, we lost the Vietnam War. And let me tell you something. The conflict between Russia and Ukraine, there's a little place called Libya, and they actually have actual slave auctions today. There is actual slavery that is currently happening. There's a thing in the Middle East called the Bakabazi, where like rich Afghanistan men will have little children that they often have sex with, and they'll be like little apprentices. And our own military, the United States military, because they are allies, overlooked this. You can look it up. Look up Bakabazi. It's written by the New York Times. Yeah, let me finish. What I'm saying is, because I got to go shortly. What I'm saying is, if you think the United States government is going to come in and be a savior for the Ukraine, you are smoking crack with Hunter Biden. As a matter of fact, America is only going to make this situation much worse, and it's going to create World War III, and it's going to actually cause problems. And what Vladimir Zelensky is doing right now is he's killing his own citizens. He needs to stop begging for all of this money and come to an agreement. We have to negotiate. This is what we do. We create a treaty.
So just hand over your land because Putin invaded you. Is what you're saying.
Be alive or have land? Yeah, I mean you're not going to be able to that land if
but Alex, what happens if they negotiate and say, okay, Russia, you can have this land? Don't you think Putin's gonna be like, okay, well, that worked. Now I can invade again and get more land?
Because that's how negotiation works. You would say, hey, we're gonna negotiate this part, and then you will not.
How many times has Putin negotiated and went back on his word?
How many times has NATO negotiated Putin and then walked back on all of the things it promised?
Well, answer me. How many times has Putin negotiated and walked back on his word?
Ian, NATO's never invaded anybody.
No,
NATO is not an aggressive force.
How many countries?
And then walk
NATO
back
is
Go ahead, Catherine. Go ahead, Catherine.
How many countries? I mean, there's so many.
I know. Catherine's questions is for Alex. Go ahead, Catherine.
Yeah, there's so many countries that have been around, in Europe and others, like all these countries. I recently traveled to Europe and Eastern Europe in particular, and I've talked to representatives, including people who work in the military, and they are terrified of Russia because they see them as hostile. Their military preparedness is constantly about
get all their natural gas from Russia if they're so terrified.
Well, no, I agree. I don't think they should.
So
I think that's a colossal
answer
mistake.
that question. If they're so terrified of them,
Alex, that's
if
a
they're so
different
terrified
point.
of them,
Alex,
why do they
that's a
get all their
separate
natural
point.
resources from? If they're so terrified of them.
They make a very bad strategic mistake.
Guys. So hold on. So Alex and Catherine, please go ahead. Alex and Catherine.
Yeah. So that is a mistake. They shouldn't be doing that. So that doesn't mean that they aren't scared, and when Russia goes in, they are brutal in their attacks. So they have a lot of military forces specifically prepared for these attacks.
Have you not seen the Nazis with the swastikas, the Ukrainian?
Okay, so the Azov battalions, how many people do you think are Azov battalion members? And two, and tell me the numbers, and two, how many of them are Nazis?
Have you seen the videos of them taping people to those poles where it is 0 degrees outside?
I have.
So do you think that's cool? So you think that's cool? So that's who you're defending, Catherine. That's who you're defending. So wake up, honey. Look in a mirror. Have a reality check.
But
Come
Alex,
to Jesus,
why are we
pie,
only
honey bunch.
attacking?
You're defending Nazis, and you're
But Alex, why are we only
taking polls
attacking
and saying
them?
the Russians are so bad.
Catherine, I'll let you respond. Go ahead.
Yeah, but basically, I know what all the points that these keep getting made. No, I don't think it's great.
Because
and
you're not very bright, Catherine.
But however,
you're not very bright.
when
You're a
enter
hypocrite.
a country,
You're a dull
Alex,
hypocrite.
when you're entering a country and you're murdering
Hold on, Alex.
people,
Hold on. Go ahead, Catherine. Yeah.
Two wrongs do not make a right, right? And then the only time I hear people talking about the wrongdoings for some reason are only when Ukrainians are doing it. And you're never talking about all the things that the Russians are doing for some reason. And I don't
I never said Russia's good. I'm not pro-Russia. Russia can kick my kid.
No, but people only talk about that for some reason. The Azovs, people don't talk about the Wagner Group, don't talk about all the, why is it just Ukraine, which is the country that has been invaded and has been
laundering all of our money, Catherine. That's the one that they're using proxy.
So your main concern, Alex, is Alex, your main, why you're targeting Ukraine, Alex, and the negatives there is mainly because so much US money is going to Ukraine. That's the biggest concern you have.
Totally corrupt is the problem. It's the massive.
Yes, Alex, that's a fair point, but that's a different point.
You guys don't let Alex respond. He literally gets asked a question.
He responded. He responded. Now I got the response from Alex. It is a heated debate. I got the response. I got the response from Alex. The response is his main concern is that the US money is going to Ukraine and there is corruption in Ukraine, which is a very valid point. And I look, that's a very valid point as well. The point you've made earlier about fixing problems within the US and looking at the border with Mexico as a more concerning problem for the US than the Ukraine war is probably a better debate to have. Like, Catherine, would you agree or disagree with the point that Alex made there? Is the border with Mexico and other domestic issues within the US a bigger concern for the US than a potential nuclear conflict with Russia or Russia taking territory from Ukraine?
I can understand people's point of view when they make that argument. So I can sympathize with that. I can understand also why it makes sense. Like, I do think there is a geopolitical case to be made about why money should go to Ukraine that benefits the US. But I can understand a disagreement and why some people might think, no, the money should be spent elsewhere. That's a fair argument to have. So, yeah.
So, Alex, how would you, if it were, in your opinion, how should the US handle the Ukraine war? What should be the next steps? Because it is a very delicate situation.
Well, anything, I think we should facilitate negotiations with Vladimir Putin and with the Ukraine. We sit with them, whether we have to sit in Poland or, this at the beginning of the conflict, they recommended doing that, and we should have done it. We need to sit there and sit down and figure this out like human beings. We are not animals. There's something that separates us from animals, and we should be able to come to an agreement. I know people are like, oh, war, we have to have war. War is unnecessary, in my opinion, if we can come to an agreement that satisfies both.
So Alex, I've got a question for you then. So we get to the position where negotiations actually start. Now, negotiations starting is not the same as them being reached to a conclusion. I think
your audio is not great, by the way, Piotr. Your audio is really shit.
I'll do it now.
It's better, much better.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So I'm in headphones in a restaurant, so everyone's looking at me while I'm.
That's fine. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah.
Okay.
So diplomacy doesn't happen overnight. It's a process, and just because you start negotiations doesn't mean that they're going to actually reach an endpoint. So, Alex, my question for you. Okay, so we get them around the table, but how can you, and whether or not you're interested in protecting Ukraine or not, but how can we guarantee that Russia just won't do this again in 5 to 10 years?
Piotr,
They
I
rebuild
have
that.
I have a rebuttal for you, just real quick.
No, let me finish. No.
No. I just want to ask this.
No, Ian. Stop.
You've asked. Hold on. Piotr, you've asked your question. So what's your question, Piotr? Just finish your question.
I'm trying to get there. If Ian would shut the hell up and stop abusing
guys.
As a co-host.
Whoa.
Guys, no one abused their. So finish your question. Finish your question, bro, and then Ian, I'll let respond. Go ahead.
I'm trying to, but the lack of mic etiquette on this stage is
finish your question, bro.
Ask your question. Don't get mad. Just ask.
Then shut up, Ian.
Oh, bro, come on. That's another attack, Piotr.
Uncalled for.
Because he keeps interrupting everything.
No, he's told you to ask your question, bro. 3 times.
I haven't finished.
And you told him to shut up,
bro.
Oh, ask your question, man.
Shut up.
For fuck's sake. He said finish your question, man. So finish your question. And you told him, you answer, I'm like, finish. He's like, finish your question. He's like, okay, shut up. Is that you finish your question? Finish your question, man.
Unbelievable.
I would love to.
Go ahead.
Unbelievable indeed. Yes. This is not how you do political discourse. Anyway, so how would you, Alex?
Ian, it's fine. Ian. Guys, Ian, it's fine. Go ahead, Piotr. No, go ahead, man.
Yeah. How would you, Alex, guarantee that Russia didn't invade Ukraine again? How would you guarantee that the Russians wouldn't threaten the eastern flank? How would you guarantee that the NATO-Russian relationship wasn't?
So you mean just to add, Alex, just to add on to it. So what you mean by Piotr, like if they do reach an agreement, how do you guarantee Russia not breaking that agreement and wanting more territory again? Is that what you meant, or I misunderstood?
Yes. How would you? It's pretty clear what I asked. I mean, how would you prevent them from just doing what they've done again in 2022 and 2027?
Why I want to ask you a question in a rebuttal before Alex answers, and I want to ask you, how do you think it's fair, right, for Ukraine to come to the table to negotiate and make an unreasonable demand, like give us Crimea? Do you think that will facilitate a conversation with Russia when it is literally a red line for Russia? Russia says, no, Crimea is always ours. This is not negotiable. Do you think like Russia will be like amenable to a conversation with Ukraine if it makes demands like that?
So look, sorry for telling you to shut up, but this is a very obviously personal and difficult topic. FYI, Crimea was
your mic, sorry, Piotr, just your mic closer if you don't mind.
FYI, Khrushchev gave Crimea to Ukraine in 1954. So Ukraine has had partial ownership of Crimea as long as Russia has had. So it's deviated between both sides. So it's also difficult to talk about an entire peninsula as just a pawn when you've got tens of thousands of Tatars, the local communities that have been there for about 500, 600 years, just being sort of flung around like they're pawns in a chess game. So I don't know. Crimea is probably going to be the biggest sticking point, and that's most people say that, including Timothy Snyder, who's followed this for years. So I think that you need to have a basic set of principles, i.e. Crimea is a no-go zone. I, for example, don't think that NATO should accept Ukraine. I think Ukraine being part of the EU, where they can have other sort of forms of security assurances, would be fine. I also think that the Russian language shouldn't be removed from, Ukrainian constitution. I also don't think that they should try and axe this relationship between Ukraine and Russia as orthodox. So there's a lot of elements.
I'll go back to the question, Piotr. You asked a good question.
Well,
Ian answered it.
How is it you solve border disputes in Central Europe? Do you solve it through invasion and force, like the Russians do, or do you solve it through negotiations and discussion? The Russians have decided to solve their disputes in Ukraine through force. And to allow them to succeed at that, to me, would have deleterious consequences for America in ways that we can't comprehend right now. And in my view is that, it doesn't necessarily mean certain things flow from that, meaning you give money to the Ukrainian government so they can continue to employ bureaucrats as opposed to a more effective use of it. But I'm not convinced that we're hearing a kind of a full explanation of the concerns about what Russia has done in Ukraine. The Ukrainians oppose the Russian invasion. It's a patriotic movement. There are extremists, obviously, in Ukraine, but it is a surprise for the Russians that the Ukrainians oppose them because they thought Russian ethnics and speakers in Ukraine would fall aside or support the Russian invasion. That turned out not to be the case. The Russians, as a country, they're inimical to not only Russia's interests, I guess that's something for the Russians to figure out, but Western interests that need to be confronted and defeated as best we're able within I think the reasonable borders that we're talking about in terms of supplying support for the Ukrainians. I would do it in a much more aggressive way to shut it down as quickly as possible, because the longer it draws out, the more likely the Russians think they can just wait it out.
Yeah, so the concept here is either a marginal or decisive victory. So does one side absolutely flatten the other through military, overwhelming, like the Russians were expected to do with Ukraine, or is there a marginal victory whereby we see a diplomatic solution and one side foregoes some degree, and let's say it's a frozen conflict, i.e., that neither side moves, and we just live with these new borders, and Ukraine has to accept that, and a lot of other parameters. Those are sort of the two options.
I want to go to, so Alex, the first question that Piotr asked is a good question. Like how let's say they reach an agreement. Ukraine is, because I'm getting questions from the audience. I'll read this one out for you. Let me just read one out. So I think you'll disagree, Alex. Do you disagree that Russia should invade all of Ukraine and that's pretty extreme, and then Ukraine becomes part of Russia? Do you think such an outcome is not as bad as many think, or it's an outcome that should never happen?
I don't think Russia wants all of Ukraine, personally.
Thank you. Thank you.
Which is that on state television that they do though constantly. So I don't know if that's necessarily true based on their own phrasing on Russian state media, which I listen to in Russian. So I don't know.
So they literally tried to take the capital.
So
I mean, they tried to invade the whole country.
But did they? But did they try to invade the capital to try to kind of have a better negotiating position for some territory out of Ukraine? Like Russia has that, because Russia has stated that they are ready to negotiate with Ukraine as long as they realize the territorial changes. So Alex, like what would be
the demands are not, it's not to take over Kiev. I mean, if they wanted to level all of, here's the funny thing, okay, maybe it's not very funny, but here's the facts. If Russia wanted to level all of Ukraine right now, they could. They just haven't. People need to realize that this is not, they are minimizing how much they do in Ukraine. That's a fact. They could literally bomb the shit out of the country right now, just like completely level it. They could do that, and they could
that's not correct. That's just not correct, Ian. They don't have enough.
No, Alex, go. Yeah, Piotr, good point. So Piotr says it's not correct. And Ian's point, Alex, what do you think? Piotr said it's not correct. Ian made the point that Russia could level Ukraine.
Weapons
What's
are
your
as strong
position?
as they say, then I think that is possible. But listen, Russia doesn't want to do that. They don't want to get into World War III. But the problem is, guys, I keep talking about the military-industrial complex loves this. They're going to keep this going, and they're going to give Ukraine just enough to stay in the game. So they're only down by 3 points. I don't know if you guys know American football, but They're just going to stay there. So they're one possession away. That they're going to think the whole time Ukraine can win the war. Ukraine can win the war, because then that rallies more support for all the dumb people that put the blue and gold flag in their bio, like, oh, Ukraine's winning this war. Ukraine's winning this war. Yeah, right. But Russia doesn't want to go too strong because they don't want to start World War III. So we're in this weird pissing match, this geopolitical pissing match, and the only people that lose is us, because they're pissing on us and telling us it's raining. So that's my problem. So listen, Pyotr, if Vladimir Zelensky really cared about his citizens, he knows that he's outmatched. I mean, everybody knows he's outmatched. That's why he's out there e-begging on every show and every magazine, on every freaking award show. So in reality, yes, I believe Russia could take him out in 2 seconds, but they know they don't want to start World War III. And the whole reason that I believe that they're even doing this is because Ukraine is threatening and joining NATO. So if they gave them
I got 2 points
that they
to that,
wouldn't do that,
Alex.
I don't believe that Russia would advance.
No, they're not doing, Alex, they're not doing it because of Ukraine joining NATO. NATO is not a threat to Russia. The Russians know that. These are all pretextual. You have to remember, these is a neo-communist regime, and they're acting like the Russian communists have done for ages, which is to look for fake Western provocations to justify their expansionist approach. And,
Very good,
and it may
Alex.
go
Very
back
good.
150 years in terms of where they feel their empire can be. But Putin is about afraid as NATO as,
Tom is on the ball.
any sensible person would be.
So I've got 2.
So Alex, I'll respond to that.
I don't necessarily think he is that afraid, but it's basically like optics. He doesn't want them to be aligned with somebody that is optically his enemy. So that's why. And listen, I believe when it comes to globalism and it comes to being the American police, America is the worst. People need to stop America from invading other countries. Our invasion in the Middle East, our invasion in other countries, we need to get our heads out of other people's asses. So if everybody wants to complain about Russia trying to get the Donbass region in between Ukraine and Russia, that doesn't matter. America does much worse. So I'm mad about the American expansion. I don't think countries should expand at all, personally.
So I've got 2 points to make, Alex, very quickly, and I'm curious for your thoughts. So number one, Russia's actually used a large proportion of its artillery stockpile, about 75% in some capacities, and there's 2 different types of bombs that you can use in military.
Your mic closer, please, bro. Sorry.
There's 2 types of military missiles that you can use: smart bombs, which have a precision guided capacity, so they can pinpoint directly using lasers and stuff like that, and hit their target very much. It's what we saw in Afghanistan when they blew up an entire balcony, not even a house, just a balcony with a member of Al Qaeda. Very, very precision strike. Then there are dumb bombs. Dumb bombs are just basically what we've used for a long time, and they just, arbitrarily land wherever and blow up. Russia used its smart bombs, all of its smart bombs, in enough amount that they ran out by about May. They're now been relying on dumb bombs. That's why you see these arbitrary artillery shots happening all the time. And that's why they're bringing in artillery from North Korea or even Syria and other countries. So they do have a huge stockpile of artillery, but it is diminishing quite quickly. So for us to say that they could just flatten Ukraine, I'm not sure that's a reasonable assessment. The other thing go on.
Sorry, I'll let you ask your question. Did you have okay? So before you make your other point, because I know Caroline and Jim are waiting as well. So I want to ask a question to Ian, and of course Tom and Alex could jump in on this one as well. What would happen if Putin is put into a corner? That the war in Ukraine is not going according to plan. Everyone's surprised regarding a lot of the military failures by Russia. If he's constantly being put into that corner, and could there be a position where he just has no choice but to start using or threatening more with nuclear arms?
I can answer that. So Russia's military doctrine, despite what you might have heard, is not to nuke first. It is to nuke second. It is to nuke in retaliation, right? So this is the question you're asking. Are they going to use nuclear weapons? No, they're not going to use nuclear weapons unless it is used on them first, or if there is an actual threat of using nuclear weapons on Russia, meaning that if America is stupid enough to start positioning nuclear bombs or, near the border, say in, like aiming it at Russia, or giving Ukrainians the potential, the ability to conduct first strike operations. For instance, flying F-16s into Moscow and bombing it. If they're under that threat, then certainly, yes,
which is why when Lindsey Graham says stupid shit like, let's give them our Abrams tanks, let's give them F-16s, that is a really, really, really bad idea, because that would actually start World War III. That would literally start World War III if they were to start doing stuff like that. So we should definitely not be escalating. We should be de-escalating. And I'm talking about the whole world when I say we. We should not be engaging with the Russians and saying, hey, let's call their bluff. Let's fuck them up. Let's send some F-16s and scare the bejesus out of them by bombing Moscow. You do not do things like that with any nuclear power. It's funny because everybody's afraid of North Korea, right? They're afraid of provocations with North Korea. Oh, we can't fly our jets too close to North Korea because they might drop a bomb on Seoul. But no one seems to be asking if it's a really good idea to make the same kind of provocations to Russia. And Russia is a much more stable country. It's got a much more powerful military compared to North Korea, which, by the way, could be very easily leveled by the United States within a single day. This is not North Korea we're talking about. We're talking about Russia, which is like the world's #2 military, the whole world, right?
Two or three.
Very bad idea. Yeah, 2 or 3. It's debatable, right? With China, their navy is actually quite big right now. But yeah, it's either 2 or 3. So it's not a good idea to have 2 superpowers battling it out like this. It is this very stupid game that the United States is currently playing by supporting a proxy war with Russia.
Yep, Alex, what say you?
Yeah, I mean, I agree, but this space has been a blast. I have to go. It's already freaking 7:20. But listen, guys, I actually really enjoyed the political discourse. Now I'm going to come and do it again. But I get it. People want to, champion and cheerlead for the next big thing. I'm sure a lot of the people that love Ukraine are probably quadruple boosted, and you're probably realizing like this is your political ideology to, lean this way and be in favor of it. But I just want you to look in the mirror and like ask yourself, why? Why do they want you to live in fear? Why do they want you to live in a constant World War III? Why is this even happening? And then why are we on this space talking about it like these are chess pieces on a checkerboard? This is not what it is. These are human beings that are dying because of imaginary lines in the sand and for the military industrial complex to benefit. And we all get screwed, and we have to watch videos of people being taped to poles. Whether you're liberal or conservative, it's all very disgusting. And I hate it. And I hate it for the young kids that are growing up and seeing, the world that it is today. But anybody out there cheerleading for America to get involved, I just want to bring up this last point. I said this earlier. America is the best when it comes to fucking something up, and they're going to fuck this deal up. I guarantee it. I don't know how, but Obama himself said it. If you want something to be fucked up, let Joe Biden handle it. He said something to that extent. So Obama doesn't even like Joe Biden. So that's all you need to know. And if Obama doesn't like Joe Biden, then I don't like Joe Biden. But honestly, I kind of like
Alex, I just
I'll
wanted
finish
to
on
say
with Alex.
Hey, Piotr, can you? Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, Piotr. I'll give you the mic in a bit, Piotr. So, Alex, you were saying?
I just
about
wanted
Obama.
to say thank you to Alex.
Okay.
That was all.
Well, no,
Okay.
and I appreciate it. And like I said, we need to do this again. And I wouldn't be leaving, but it's 7:20. I got to do something right at 7:30. I have another.
Man, you've been here for like 3 hours, so
You've been great,
permission to leave, Alex.
You've been
It's great.
fantastic, Alex.
And it's been great. And like I said, somebody said it earlier, nationalism. I don't like that word because it's been hijacked by the mainstream media, to say Nazi, but it shouldn't be a crime to love your country. And I love the state of Texas. I live in Dallas. I don't know if you guys are familiar, but I'm about 5 hours from the border, like 6.5 from where it's really, really bad. And I'll tell you this much. Every day I'm in Dallas and I walk around this park and I see buses of people getting off, and I'll see a man with like 3 kids and they have like a backpack and they're like have, clothes that like they just got from Walmart or something, like brand new clothes. And I wonder like where these kids are going. I wonder where they're doing. I see them walking around. I see them with masks. So I'm just saying I can touch and feel the problems that we're having here in Texas. And I'm pro immigration. I don't think that we shouldn't have immigrants, but I just don't think kids should be sold to coyotes to come across the border and be sex trafficked and drug trafficked. So I'm seeing that. And for me, that's why it's hard for me to be so empathetic when I talk about the conflict in Ukraine, because I see the conflict here. I lost one of my best friends, Clark Gable. He was the son of Clark Gable, the famous actor. He died of a fentanyl overdose to a 32-year-old kid. I say that, I say kid, he just had a lot of life ahead of him. So I've seen it. I've been affected by the drug war. I've been affected by the border crisis we're having here in Texas. So I would just like it. Even my Governor Abbott, he's an idiot too. He's not addressing it. He's Republican. So I'm just saying it's not even a political thing. The left wing and right wing are on the same bird, and that bird is autistic and is about to fly through a plate glass window. So we have to stop. Listen, my last point. We have to stop idolizing politicians. Idolizing a politician is like thinking the stripper actually likes you. The stripper doesn't like you, and these politicians don't care about us. We need to care about one another. So I'm happy that we could have a civil discussion. We need to do it again. So thank you for having me, Mario. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you,
We
Alex.
really can't wait to
See you
have
guys.
you again. So,
Thanks, man.
Absolutely.
Take care, bro.
But yeah, so
I've got Jim.
can we
Jim,
go to-
we've been waiting for a while, man. If you don't mind.
By the way, I got a DM from someone that I just looked at when I was about to get on, and they said, that was the first time I've ever heard Mario yell.
Yeah, I yeah.
Yeah, you got pretty
Sorry, guys.
No, well, and it gets kind of out of hand, honestly, when we're talking about this. But the reality is that we are playing this game again, where we are allowing American politicians who, frankly, kind of looking at the original title of the room, we're allowing politicians to get by with crap. I mean, we don't do anything about it. We don't have apparently anymore a legal construct that holds every American accountable to the law. And so these politicians just keep moving these things forward without any opposition. And honestly, that's challenging for the world. I have friends in Asia. I've got friends in Europe. And it's I've never been so embarrassed about how we're doing things right here that allows this stuff to get so out of hand. And what's interesting to me,
Jim, how so? Would you say we're more corrupt now? We, as in the U.S., the U.S. is more corrupt now than it was 10 years ago. You can't say that.
Oh, yes, it is.
I would argue that in some, I wouldn't say overall more corrupt than 10 years ago, but we've got some significant areas where that corruption is getting bad. What we've seen in the Twitter files, what we see in the way that high-level politics, like you would never see.
I agree. Sorry, continue your point. Sorry, Jim.
I was going to say you would never see presidents get by with what they get by with right now when they're found out. I mean, yeah, people have been getting by with stuff.
It is more
politics.
corrupt, is what you're saying.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. But in some key areas. So,
I mean,
right now
the president is a very important area. Wouldn't you agree?
Well, no, I agree. But here's why I say this, and as it relates to Ukraine. So we've got a president sitting in the White House right now whose family is clearly connected to things in Ukraine. We see right now evidence on a laptop and a person that was doing business with them, Tony Bobolinsky, who has benefited in some manner in a large way from China. And these are two key areas of our geopolitical concern right now for the United States. And we've got the guy sitting in the White House who it's no big deal. Interestingly, we have a former president who was claimed to be influenced and corrupted by these, particularly the Russiagate thing related to Donald Trump, and we find out there wasn't a dang thing there. And we're messed up right here in that political turmoil, and that takes us away from being able to focus on these things. Because listen, Ukraine's important. The whole situation's important. I'm totally against the military-industrial complex and the way they stir these things up. I'm mostly with most of what Alex is saying, but the thing is that we can't address it in a rational way because there's no restraint, and that's what's different in 10 years. Is the restraint is slowly whittling away, whereas corruption's always been there. Politics is corrupt. As I always say, this politics thing would be easy if I didn't have to deal with people. I mean, the corruption is there, but people are getting by with the corruption in the last 10 years more than they ever have in this country. We're beginning to look like a third world country in some key areas, and it concerns me greatly.
Well,
this
is Tom.
Tom, I'm gonna go ahead. No, go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, go ahead. It's there's different types of corruption. There's the kind of you have to give me a bribe to avoid this ticket type of corruption versus the kind of the core corruption that undermines governance and can really destroy a country. We like to think because we're so technologically advanced and we have all these luxuries that it's inevitable that we maintain this standard of living. Well, there are examples in country after country, not only in our current historical period, but throughout history, where countries do take a step back in terms of living standards and other things taken for granted because of endemic corruption and collapse of the social structures and such. And in the case of the last 10 years, there are big concerns about abuses of the FBI and, other agencies and such. But here you have an embrace by one major political party of using the powers of federal law enforcement to jail and target and harass and spy on their political opponents. And that's something we haven't seen before in American history. So there are threats to the republic that we haven't seen before. And in my view, it's a communist revolutionary period beyond that, in the sense that these attacks on our core institutions of government, whether it be, the courts or Congress or just the process of elections, which is kind of a different piece, but part of the same challenge we're facing as a country. So the corruption is a significant threat, and as we see and we've heard about, it can cause severe national security issues. The classified information is probably small bore, compared to encouraging the worst of America's enemies to take steps they otherwise would have not have taken, because America is tottering and or compromised because its leadership is corrupt.
Well, and I'm glad you brought up the FBI thing and all these agencies secretly working with corporations to shut down free speech. That is a threat that always, has has lingered as a possibility all the way back to the, we're going to talk about a new church committee thing. Well, all the way back to the actual church committee, Frank Church was saying very clearly what he saw in terms of capabilities, if it ever got out of hand, would be a threat to the republic. Now, there were ways in which what he did see and how it was playing out at the time were potential threats. It was never to this level. And that's the kind of stuff, that is one area of our governance in the United States that has not been a serious threat to our freedoms. And it is right now. And that is very third worldy. Like we've got people in our government on both sides of the aisle who really, really think, and mostly on the Democrat side of the aisle, with respect to fellow Democrats here that I have personal respect for, but the Democrat Party mostly, they look at President Xi and just wish that they had that kind of control over things. Maybe they don't think it should go every bit as far as Xi, but they really like kind of the stuff he's doing.
Ed, be prepared to respond to this since he's referring to liberals. I think it's only fair. Ed or
well,
Catherine,
and by the way, I have respect for Ed, so I'm not like wanting to blow him out of the water, but I'm curious his thoughts. But so when we go back to when the Olympics were in China not long ago, and the media fawning over how orderly and wonderful things are there, and the thing is, we have had what to some people has looked like relative disorder compared to stuff like that, but at our core, we had a fundamental liberty that no one could overcome. Whereas in China, they've had this thing that seemed like order and the cities are clean and all this kind of stuff. But at their core was corruption, was the mutilation of people, speaking primarily but not exclusively of the Uyghurs, the elimination of people who didn't fit a certain place. Down in Brazil right now, we've got stuff going on where people are getting arrested without due process. Now it's well over 3,000 people who are now being held in Brazil, without due process. Like they don't even have charges. And what I'm saying is, if we have something like what's going on in the FBI and what we're finding out in the Twitter files, which is the tip of the iceberg, in my opinion, and we see that institutionally throughout our bureaucratic system in those particular kinds of agencies, that is evidence of a potential downfall if it's allowed to go unchecked. We've been successful at checking that somewhat in the past, both because of our personal morality as a country, which has never been perfect, but it's been good in those areas, and also because of the actual ability of the actions of the actors who are involved in those agencies, who are humans like everyone, and we fight that corruption all the time. So that's what concerns me.
Like Jim, I definitely see your point, but at the same time, I feel like this is just a bias on your end, because from my point of view, the FBI has had issues for quite some time. Let's just go back to the 2016 election where James Comey came out and said Hillary's under investigation, what, a week before the election? I mean, no matter what side you're on, you're going to be able to pick and choose like what you think's right that the FBI is doing, what you think's wrong. And there's plenty of times over the course of the past 20 years where this roles have been switched, and it was Democrats calling the FBI corrupt and Republicans have been defending them. So I think it's just this back and forth, and I think it's very political. And we have to remember that the FBI is being run by Christopher Wray, who's actually a contributor to the Federalist Society and who was appointed by Donald Trump. And before him, it was James Comey, who was also a conservative, who was appointed by a conservative president. So to say that one party is more corrupt than the other and to
It's not
pinpoint
a
it as
party
being the
issue.
Democrats, I think that's an
It's the
overreach.
deep state versus the elected officials.
But
That's the
Ed, if
issue.
Yeah, I mean,
Ed, if that's your,
so-
just to answer you real quickly, Ed, if that's your argument, then you and I are agreeing almost entirely. But what I'm saying, the reason I bring up the Democrat Party right now is that what the FBI is, and I agree with you that the Republican Party in the past has been way too deferential to those areas. I agreed with that back then. Like that, in that
Patriot
sense, I'm
Act
not
was a big
partisan either.
problem.
But let me say this: that right now, the greatest beneficiary of actually what we know the FBI and even the CIA and DHS are doing right now is a direct benefit to one party, not to another, and that's the Democrat Party right now. So with it, so I think you bolster my case about the last 10 years, because the Hillary Clinton thing, like, and here's the other thing: if Hillary Clinton was guilty of it, then Comey should have moved. If Donald Trump was guilty of it, then Comey should have moved, or whoever else, if it really was there. But the reality is that the force of that, and I'm using air quotes here, deep state problem that I'm describing is going against Republicans vastly more than it's going against Democrats, and that's the concern.
I see your point in saying that, but at the same time, I think that the FBI themselves, their agenda isn't to go after Republicans. Their agenda is to do what they believe is right. And if you want to say, their agenda is to keep those in power, or to keep the DOJ and the FBI, having more, to give them more power, maybe that's true, but I don't think there's a political agenda there. I just don't see that.
Well, with respect, Ed, there's no way that you can read the Twitter files and not make the claim that every political.
But would you say, Jim, would you say that's with social platforms, not Twitter files, with the social platforms that are left leaning.
Yep. No, I get that, but it expresses the operation of the FBI. Like the social platforms have been up to this point entirely operated by the FBI. I mean, that's what we're learning.
Yeah, but entirely. Would you say entirely operated?
It is worth pointing out that the social media platforms actually pushed back.
Yes.
Right, like Twitter actually pushed back against the FBI. It was only through nudging and a lot of coercion over several years between the FBI, the State Department, and Adam Schiff that Twitter eventually capitulated. So we have to keep that in mind.
Yeah, but so let's go back. Let's see what the FBI did with Twitter. They did what they believed was right at the time, and they had a lot of precedent. And they had
you're just saying that. I mean, what's the basis for that?
That's what I'm saying. They had a lot of things that happened in the past, like Comey coming out about Hillary Clinton right before the election, and Democrats.
You keep referencing that. That only happened because Wiener's laptop was found.
Protocol. Hold on, Protocol.
Can you finish?
Ed, finish your point, please. Yeah, go ahead, and then Tom, I'll let you respond.
So I mean, like in Comey came out against Hillary Clinton, and Democrats were outraged about that, right?
Because of Wiener's laptop, right?
Protocol.
It comes to the following election, and the FBI believes that there's misinformation out there, and they don't want this, or they believe it may be misinformation, and they don't want the same thing happening where they allow some information to go out that could affect the election. Were they right in doing what they did? I don't believe they were in that case. But at the same time, I don't think they were influenced on, let's get a Democrat elected. I think they were influenced by them doing what they believed was the right thing, and either way, they wouldn't have won. One side attacking them, just like in 2016 they had the
What are we
Democrats
talking
attack.
about? Everyone, the media, the FBI, they're all on board with this idea that Trump won because Russia manipulated this 2016 election. This is a talking point that was pushed by people like Ned Price, who, by the way, is working for the State Department right now as as its head, basically. And you had Hillary Clinton for several years going on about how Trump won because of Russian meddling. And so, of course, like anything that the FBI does that follows that lie effectively supports the Democrat agenda.
Well, and the evidence is, I mean, they did know it was wrong, and it was partisan. Andrew McCabe, when you see Peter Strzok and Andrew McCabe and the rest, with their virulent anti-Trump and anti-conservative positions, obviously it was political. And there was no evidence that they reasonably believed what they were saying was true, either with Trump and Russia or with the Biden information. But there's plenty of evidence that what they were doing was nakedly political. To suggest that they did it because they thought it was the right thing to do is belied not only by the evidence, and is unjust, and still doesn't provide any justification for federal law enforcement telling third-party sites like Twitter or anyone else to suppress content. No one hired the FBI to police our speech. And to the degree they think they have the right to do it, they need to be disabused of that through prosecutions.
Well, I wouldn't say they policed our speech. They requested Twitter remove stuff that
They
was against their
policed our
terms of
speech.
service.
I mean, you can mischaracterize the Twitter files as much as you'd like. They wanted this material taken down. They were pressuring Twitter to take this down. If that's not policing speech, I don't know what the meaning of police means.
Yeah, so I think the same thing when they bring Jack Dorsey in to have him testify. Is that pressuring Jack Dorsey? Is that policing speech on Twitter when they pressure him?
Congress was also anti-constitutionally requiring these companies and pressuring these companies to police speech as well. The FBI is not the only perp here. We have the NSA doing it. We have the CIA doing it, and we had the State Department doing it, DHS and HHS. There was a crime spree against our civil liberties.
And by the way, I want to add one thing to that, if I could, just real quick.
Hold on one second, Jim. Can we go? Caroline's had her hand up for a while. Can you respond to this?
Well, give me just a moment.
Yeah,
Listen,
go, Jim. I'll let Jim jump in and then go, Caroline.
Yeah. So listen, but here's the thing. What we're talking about right here, that Ian and Tom and I are making a point about, Ed, with respect to you, is that this little dialogue I have right here as I'm looking at my phone, and I'm looking at Piotr there. I see Ed Krasenstein. I see Catherine, and then I see other people. And I know that it's a little bit probably more seemingly conservative than you guys there, but I'm seeing you guys also in this. We're having this debate. We're even getting heated every once in a while, and we keep talking to one another, and we're still interested in doing so. That has not happened on social platforms because directly the influence of the FBI in particular and these other agencies. Now, that's what we are missing in this country right now, and the federal government is moving it in the direction that they have been moving it in influence.
And I agree, and I don't think that, like the New York Post article, I don't think that should have been censored. I agree with you 100% there. I just don't see it as being the FBI saying, let's hurt Republicans to help Democrats.
Caroline?
For any new faces, I generally agree with Jim and Tom, and Ian. But I really think the discussion of Republican versus Democrat is really only important in as far as it explains what happened. It is completely useless getting in a pissing contest over who was wronged more. This is a conversation about constitutional rights. And I think to make the conversation about anything different is entirely a distraction. We should all agree that it is wrong for the FBI to get involved and censor people regardless of whether or not you agree with them. I am not okay with the FBI censoring Ed, no matter how much I may disagree with him, and no matter how angry he may make me, or how there are times where I may think that he's not being intellectually honest. He should still be able to express all of those opinions. The fact that we are getting distracted by, who was more hurt by this is completely irrelevant. We should all be on the same side about how corrupt this is, and we should all be equally outraged. And that is why people who are, excuse me, that's why people who are in favor of small government are in favor of small government, because they do not want to have enough, they don't want the government to have enough control to piss off either side to the degree that they currently are. So it's like, it's not this, government is a neutral thing. The people who are in charge of government are what make it a non-neutral thing. So we need to be okay with the government having enough power that if our quote unquote enemies, the other side, that we're okay with them wielding that power. When you're in control, you need to treat the government like, hey, in 4 years, it might be completely the other way. And if the people who hate me and disagree with me have that same amount of power, that's going to be okay for me. That's all I have to say.
So the difference is, in terms of ideology, I would submit it is the left that has spent and is spending billions under the with the goal of suppressing their political opponent's speech. The right doesn't have organizations that are created out of whole cloth to justify the censorship of leftists. I mean, it just is. This whole issue is a creature of the left, the ideological left, and obviously the political class associated with that entity. The Democrats have joined in, but this is a left-right issue. The left wants to censor and suppress and jail their political opponents. There's not much appetite at all for that in the conservative right in America. No one. It just doesn't occur to us. And believe me, I'm part of the movement, right? I meet with all the conservatives. We all talk about all sorts of public policy issues. One of those issues that never comes up is, how do we censor our political opponents? How do we make sure they don't have access to social media? How is it we delete their accounts? How is it, that sort of approach? The left has entire organizations devoted to that, and transnational organizations supported by governments directing at that. And we have the president of the United States saying that's what he wants to do and has directed his agencies to do so. It's a real threat to the core aspect of America, which is the First Amendment, which allows us to engage in free speech, associate with others freely, and petition our government. Without those core rights, our republic falls in large measure.
Catherine,
so I've got to go. So do you mind if I just go?
Yeah.
Okay.
I just wanted to quickly respond just to what Tom said. So, I mean, I do agree that it does happen more from the left. I don't know if the right engages in some of this. I don't think the left sits there and decides to engage in this, but the left does engage with this more disproportionately because the media institutions, sort of whatever you want to call it, the mainstream media, whatever you want to call it, is more ran by the left. And so there's more tools available to do this. So I think it happens more on the left, for sure. I will acknowledge that. But I think when we start doing, if we start to just address it as, the left is doing this instead of addressing it in a more universal way, we have less of a chance of solving this because we're addressing it as sort of a political issue and pointing fingers as opposed to addressing the core issues.
Well, explain to me how it gets done in America, other than to say who supports this, what is the policy they're supporting, what politicians do they rely on to advocate this policy, and hold them accountable for it. The right and Republicans aren't doing it. I mean, so to pretend in theory that there are some conservatives out there who have this agenda ignores the elephant in the room, that there's this massive effort underway institutionally and with government to suppress speech. We have evidence of it. And, just because you want to, I appreciate the willingness to, the desire to see evil on both sides. And obviously that's true in some circumstance, but it also blinds one sometimes to the reality is the threat is in America from the left to free speech, their institutions, their ideology, their funders, and their politicians. And it's happening now. It's ongoing, not only in Twitter in some respects, but on Facebook and YouTube in major respects. It's partisan and it's ideological.
Also in the media.
And when that's the case, that means we have to talk about what Democrats are supporting and what ideologues on the left are trying to justify in terms of being anti-constitutionalists and pro-censorship.
And
but I guess what I'm saying is, would it not?
No, go ahead.
Would it not help to look at it from the point of view of like, here's what's being violated, right? And this is what we should put in place to make sure that that does not get violated, and no one should violate it, right? And while I agree with you, Tom, I don't disagree.
But they don't agree. They don't agree with us on that. They don't believe that our rights should be violated. They think free speech from the communist left is a artifact of Western privilege that needs to be overturned so those who are aggrieved by the free speech fanatics of the West can be vindicated and take power. They don't agree with our support for the First Amendment. There's no convincing them. They have to be defeated and stopped.
And by the way, I want to add to what I want to add a little bit to what Tom,
go ahead, Piotr.
Point that Tom made earlier. Tom pointed out he's been in meetings, and those discussions never come up. I've from time to time been in those meetings with Tom, with groups of people. I've been in a lot of other meetings in the same thing. And I have to tell you that not only is there no discussion, even a hint of a discussion in those kinds of meetings with major organizations on the conservative right, if that's the best way to term it in the United States, where that kind of stuff gets discussed at all. And even to the point when, Tom may agree or disagree with this, but I'm going to tell you, I've seen people who are like, what in the heck is it that such and such an organization is trying to do what the left is doing? And I apologize for using that terminology. I'm just saying what someone might say. And why would you do that? And then they'll attack people on the conservative right who ever thought that way. Yep. It is a huge difference here. And Catherine, you're a classical liberal in many ways because you do actually believe in these ideas of freedom. And we may disagree on little things, but you are that way. But that's not the way it is in Washington, D.C. right
Correct.
now.
And I want to add to what Jim and Tom just said. There is no cancel culture on the right that is even comparable remotely to what is going on the left. There is no media matters on the right. The media matters exists only to deplatform people on the right. That's what it serves, right? It goes after Tucker Carlson, goes after the advertisers. Breitbart doesn't have any advertising because of all these organizations going after it, claiming that it promotes hate speech simply for reporting on crimes, for instance, that are.
So I've got to go. So I just wanted to chime in to say thanks, Mario, again. Appreciate you guys. Just for FYI for everyone, Ian and I are in touch quite often, and I actually agree with a lot of what he says. Even if we get a bit elated or angry, it's in the spirit of the discourse. This war is very, very difficult. And just a quick observation, I think it's very interesting how quickly we spin back to the American-focused element of the bipartisanship, because it shows you very much how much we look at this from our specific country elements, right? And I think that's an important point to always keep in mind is the discussion itself as well as the subject matter. Tom, love a lot of what you said. Caroline, love a lot of what you said. And Mario, can I just say, I'm really proud that I almost got you agitated because I think that's quite a big achievement according to some listeners. I'm teasing you, man. I'm teasing you. But anyway, take it easy, guys. Have a good rest of your day.
We like having you on, Piotr. Thank you.
Ian, do you think that problem would exist if, I think you kind of answered it with your second part of your answer, but would that problem be the same if
the right took over?
No, look, actually, it's a better way to ask my question. You kind of fixed my question. If the right took over, the problem will remain. It's a systematic issue, not a political one.
The same issue, no, because in the 90s, a lot of the internet was created more or less by libertarians, right? The ideologically libertarian people like David Sachs, for instance, people like Elon Musk. You could say they're, you could argue they are socially liberal people, but ideologically, I would align them more with libertarians. And libertarians are basically right-wing people, right? Like, that is how we view things through today's lens of what right-wing is, right? Right-wing used to originally mean, religious right, people like super hardcore into promoting very, very, very extreme values, if you will, right? But that's not what the right is nowadays. Now the right just means libertarians and conservatives, right? Anyone who wants to conserve. So I would say that no, it would not be the same thing if the right took over. And in many places where the right has taken over or created, it's more of a meritocracy.
Like where?
The internet by itself is I would say it's a right-wing creature. It is about meritocracy. It is about essentially everybody has the freedom to do whatever they want.
We've heard from users of different platforms, like censorship does exist on right-wing social platforms as well.
Yeah, but I would not call them right-wing. That's the thing. Like a site like Gap, for instance, very heavy on censorship, despite what its creator Andrew Torba likes to claim. He likes to claim that he's a free speech platform, but he does not allow certain conversations. You cannot talk about sexuality, for instance, like porn, unless you want to condemn it, right? I'm not saying that that he's wrong to do that. He owns the platform. He can do whatever he wants with it, right? That's the point of it. However, he says it's a free speech platform. Not really. It's free speech.
So you're saying that if the right took over, if the right
like
had the influence, you wouldn't have the same level of censorship and that ignore cancel culture. Just the level of censorship wouldn't be the same.
And it certainly would. And also, there are people who would identify as the right, who I would not personally consider them to be right wing. I would consider them to be maybe post liberal, for instance, right? That is certainly or you would say a third way, right? A third position. There are many people who identify as third position. They may call themselves conservatives, or other people call them conservatives, which is usually the case. But they're not, like, classically speaking, conservatives. Now, they are a small minority. I'm not demonizing them. I'm not saying they're right or wrong. But in terms of conservatives, people of conservative values, traditionally in America, do not appreciate it when people are silenced. If you look at our space right now, I think I would say that the majority of panelists on here, yourself excluded, are conservatives, and we are more than happy to have conversations with people on the left. We don't believe in silencing people on the left, right? Like if Brian Kresenstein or Ed Kresenstein want to say something that we disagree with, we don't believe that they should be banned and silenced and exiled into some gulag. Whereas if this
He's
were
slightly muted.
Well, I'm not muting him, so the point is, we're not down with that, because we know what it's like to be on the receiving end of it. And beyond the whole receiving end thing, some people can say, oh, you're only saying that because you experience it. That's not actually true. For a lot of us here, we understand that there's a certain principle here that's at stake. If you eliminate free speech, you eliminate the ability for people to have these kinds of conversations or to have certain opinions, then you are effectively taking away their right to exist, right? That goes against the entirety of the foundation of our ethical guidelines, right? Like, basically, if you are a Judeo-Christian person, right, then you base your idea on you base your principles, your morals on natural law, on what you believe, that you believe in the golden rule. Like, if you're a Christian, you might Jesus said, do unto others as they do unto you, right? Like, what you expect them to do. And that is a very foundational aspect of what it means to be a Western conservative. And this is true for any country that embraces or was founded on these principles, meaning anywhere in Europe, anywhere in North America, certainly, right, and maybe certain countries in Asia, right, not China, unfortunately, but in other countries, most certainly, right, and this is how many people, I would say the vast majority of people, view this, right. This is the ideology. So the left, on the other hand, is a complete rejection of Western civilization, of Western philosophical values. The thousands of years that Aristotle, Plato, Socrates, and the Bible and the Quran and and the Torah have taught us, right? It's a complete rejection of that. It's basically postmodernism. It says that nothing is true, right? Nothing is true. Everything that history, everything, it's a lie, and that everything is permitted, right? When nothing is true, everything is permitted. That's a quote from Alabut. You should read that book. So that is the difference. So we would not, if the right wing controlled everything, say we controlled Hollywood, we controlled the internet, and we once did at once upon a time. But if we did control it, we would not be censoring the left. They would be free to speak as we do.
This is. I'd love Catherine and Brian to respond to this point. Just having people from the left to respond to this point. Like I was under the impression before Ian's like confirmation bias is the reason for censorship, and that exists on both sides of the aisle. That's a human a feature of us being humans, a cognitive bias. Brian, Catherine, like, would you agree with Ian's point, or what parts of it would you agree?
It's just so I mean I'm typically against censorship. I'm typically against cancel culture, but I have a line. I think certain issues, certain things people say can be censored, maybe should be censored. If you want to go out and, like Kanye said, say I love Nazis or whatever, I think that people canceling Kanye, I would support that. Now, the right is guilty of it as well. I mean, I remember they banned French fries. They canceled the Dixie
They didn't
Chicks.
ban French
There's a
fries.
list that
Right.
goes.
Well, come on. They didn't ban.
What?
Nobody
I
banned
In the
French
90s,
fries.
they did try
hundreds
to
of
ban
things that
music.
the
I
right
mean,
has
let's be
banned.
fair.
It's
There was
not
a big.
just to the left. It's based on what people believe in. They want to ban what's against what they believe in. I don't think people should be saying I love Nazis. I wouldn't buy something from Kanye because of that. I think that both sides do it. I think that there's biases on both sides that think that the other side does it worse, but I don't really think that's the case.
But a lot of what you're talking about, Brian, is about decisions that are made in the areas of free association. I think what is really concerning here, and those are important issues. I'm not saying they're not, but what's really at issue here is with what's happened with the Twitter files is that we got government intervention in those decision making processes.
Yeah,
where
but
it
Jim,
should
the
have
right allowed the
absolutely
government to
none.
do
Essentially, the
this,
freedom of
right?
association
I
is very
gotta read
different.
it.
You
I'll
are
just
free
say
to
one thing,
associate
and
with
I'm
who
gonna
you
get out of
want,
this
right?
room.
As a left wing person or right wing person, you are free to boycott Kanye West or like not want to have French fries in your own establishment. That's your right. But there's a difference. There's a massive difference between wanting to personally boycott something or using your establishment, your private business to block something from that you don't agree with. There's a big difference between that and using the mechanisms of government to censor people that you disagree with.
Yeah, the right
Prodigal, you
helped
were
set,
trying to.
the right helped set this up, right? Listen, the left has power and they're utilizing it more than anybody ever expected. But let's not forget, it was Clinton and Republicans in Congress that allowed the FCC, the Telecommunications Act, that repealed Glass-Steagall. They've allowed the mergers in all these industries, right? It was Bush who created the Patriot Act and the Department of Homeland Security. We helped create this monster. The left has wielded it
It's
effectively.
actually true. Like
To
ESG
silence.
was
It is true.
actually
It is true.
ESG was
It's
actually
100.
created
What
in
did the
part
department? Was the
by the Bush
Department of Homeland
administration.
Security involved in this? Who created the Department of Homeland Security? We did. We created these entities that have now been wielded against us. And I'm not disagreeing that the left has the power, but the establishment right and the establishment left have worked together. I don't even think it's a right issue. I think it's a populist issue. They completely killed the populist left. It does not exist. If you think Bernie Sanders and the squad represents the populist left, when they retract a letter to try to come to a peaceful solution to Ukraine because they get blowback, it doesn't exist. The only place where populism exists in America is on the right. And these organizations have come out. And the only other thing I want to correct is, the Clinton example gets brought up. Let's recall the only reason why he made that statement because Anthony Weiner was sexting an underage girl. And then it came out that there was countless emails on his laptop because his wife, Huma Abedin, was an aide to Hillary Clinton that were there and backed up. That was put out. I mean, if you look at it, you talk about bias. We have the drafts of Comey's memo. He said it was gross negligence. At that standard, it was a crime. And this was during an administration that sent more whistleblowers and other people to jail than anybody else. And this is at a time when you get a subpoena from a federal court. You let me know what happens when you break Blackberries with hammers, when you use bit bleach to wipe your hard drive, and you pretend none of this occurs, right? Anybody who engages in litigation knows if you're going to claim privilege or something's not relevant, you create a privilege log, you do in-camera review with the judge, and you decide what's relevant or not. That's not what occurred. She was issued subpoenas. She ignored them. She said hundreds of thousands of emails were about her daughter's wedding, etc. And when we talk about corruption, people, unless you're from the third world or from former communist countries, you don't realize how it works. America has a different breed of it. What do you think these book deals are for? They're giving multi-million-dollar advances to people that are never going to get paid. What do you think those speeches are for from banks? Right? People remember Trump said, I want to see the transcripts. Let me let you in on a little secret. It's my firm belief that Hillary Clinton's health was so bad that there was no way she was traveling and giving 200 speeches across the world to make tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars. This is the corruption that exists now in America. And a lot of people don't realize the extent it's gone to, right? This is not something limited to the left or right, right? Ignoring, Victoria Nuland, bringing it back to Ukraine, being on the phone and basically planning who's going to replace the Ukrainian government during the coup. I mean, Lindsey Graham and John McCain were there cheering them on that we're going to give you weapons for a war. I mean, there's interests in the left and the right, which are establishment, uniparty, neoliberals, neocons, whatever you want to call them, that are working together to this. You think I trust Lindsey Graham and Mitch McConnell with this? When we talk about China's rise, look at Elaine Chao and her family's connections. Look at his brother-in-law, Jim Breyer of Breyer Capital, and how close he is to Xi and what's going on there. This is so, the corruption is so preeminent that people either don't want to believe it or they can't see how this money is flowing through these different entities. But
Prodigal, you make fantastic points because about general corruption, but to the point of a particular corruption that we are learning has taken place on social media platforms. And by the way, the Bush administration was evil in working
this
toward
is more
the
to do with
Patriot Act.
Mario's question, right? Basically, if the right-wing culture were to control, if the right-wing controls culture, to answer that question, I would say it would not be the same as the left because the right does not.
I think
embrace
but the
cancel culture
right
the
wing
same way.
culture, I don't know, like I just don't think the culture will be the same if the right or the left, either one, was in power versus not in power. When you're in power, when you have the ability to censor, it's harder not to censor versus not having the ability.
Well,
Like
the right
we
did
had,
have power. It did have power.
But Trump, there's no evidence Trump did it.
Mm-hmm.
There's a big word there.
No, but Trump, but Trump, no, but this is not. But I'm not talking about Trump. I'm talking like Twitter was left is and was not was is left leaning. Facebook is left leaning. So this is the issue. Like we haven't seen social platforms right leaning to see how that would look like.
I mean, there's 4chan. There's 4chan. I mean, you could look at 4chan.
Yeah, but listen. The reality is that as far back as 2007, 8, 9, 10, the left-leaning platforms, Twitter and Facebook, were very open places for discussion.
And if we
Everyone was
trust-busted them, it would have never been an issue.
People were building platforms where they were talking about. People were building platforms where they were talking about issues and growing their influence. That stopped when the federal government got involved. Now, the problem, I think, Mario, is that it is the tools.
Okay.
Who was? Sorry, who was? Hold on, Jim. Hold on, protocol. Hold on, bro. Jim, was that you speaking?
Yeah, that was Jim speaking.
Oh shit! Sorry, man. Yeah, continue. I muted you because I thought Tom was speaking for some weird reason. I muted you. I thought this background was on your end. Go ahead. Sorry.
No worries.
The problem you're saying. The problem is.
Yeah. So the problem that we're facing here is the tools that are there are fundamentally the problem. Now, if right people on the right came into power and started utilizing them wrongly, I'm going to tell you, I'd be fighting against it too. Like I get a lot of grief for I'm not a pacifist, but being anti-war and talking against the military-industrial complex. Like I get those arguments from people on the right, but the fact is they're wrong. Okay, so the tools that are extra constitutional that exist and therefore invalid, that have allowed the left to do what I'm describing in my arguments here, are the problem fundamentally, because human nature is only good when we work really hard at it. Not working hard at it, human nature's bad. One of the
were those tools an outgrowth of the Patriot Act?
Protocol, hold on. So
I'm just saying,
I have a protocol.
It's like no nuance in this.
I love you, protocol. Jim, question. Would you say, and I'll go to Brian and Tyra, and then we'll kind of wrap it up with Tom, Nick, and Ian.
I mean, she's had her hand up for a while, so I'd like
take it easy, guys.
Caroline.
Caroline. Yeah, sure. We'll go to Brian, Caroline, and Tyra. So the question I have for you, Jim, is very briefly: is it a systematic or a political issue? And I'm talking about censorship.
Well, it's systematic in the sense that through the Patriot Act and things like that, we have built tools that have allowed manipulation to take place. It's political in the sense that, and this is where we get into the moral issues that I brought up earlier, in the sense that whoever is willing morally to make the compromise can utilize the tools that are there. I assert we need to reinstitute a constitutional idea of what the Bill of Rights is. The Patriot Act eviscerated the Fourth, Fifth, and Sixth Amendments fundamentally, some others as well, but those key ones. And it has allowed a manipulation to take place, which in the Bush administration happened from the right, although I think Bush was a horrible president, but has lately been happening with the left in this social media space. And those tools need to be taken away because we need to reassert the Constitution. The tools are the problem. The issue is that right now, my argument at least, is that the manipulation is benefiting the left far more than the right in this country.
So Brian, Caroline, and Tyra, go ahead.
Yeah. So somebody said that like Trump never wanted to boycott anything or cancel anything. He literally called for the canceling, the boycotting of Apple, of AT&T, of HBO, of CNN. I mean, it's not like he was the master of calling for boycotts when he was president. So to just pretend that this is just a thing that happens on the left and not the right, it's just irresponsible, in my opinion.
But did he take the actions utilizing the federal government to assert that?
No, but did Biden take the action of using the federal government to force Twitter? No,
Yes, he did.
Yes, he did.
Yes, he did. The evidence says he did.
Biden did not personally ask the FBI to make those decisions. The FBI.
But would Biden do it personally, or would he do it through his team?
He did do it personally. Look at the Facebook files that the Missouri Attorney General put out. That's the evidence.
So we'll go to. I'll let you finish, Brian.
No. So what I'm saying, a lot of people are saying
with respect, I just want to say that here's the problem, right? Bush created all the tools, the DHS, the Patriot Act, and even ESG was kind of like a Bush creation. But the right is unwilling to use these tools in the same way that the left is, because the right is more principled. That's just facts.
No, okay. But my argument is that several people have said the right doesn't call to cancel people, and this is separate from the Twitter files. I'm just saying, in general, people calling for the cancellation of companies, of people. Trump was a master of that. Now,
but he was unwilling to use the mechanisms of government to fulfill any of his demands. They were not even demands. They were like, "Oh, let's cancel the fake news." He would say stuff like that, but not actually do anything against them.
Okay, so that was aside from the Twitter files. I'm just saying, in general, the right calls for cancellation just as much as the left does. Now, going back to the Twitter files, the DOJ is independent of the executive branch and the president. They make their own decision.
That's not true.
But that's
not true. You just say these things. It's not based in reality.
But that is how it is supposed to work. Whether you want to.
No, it isn't. Constitutionally, it would be unconstitutional if they were quote independent. I mean, the executive branch includes the Justice Department. It reports to the president. They don't have any authority outside the president, arguably.
Traditionally, the DOJ is independent from the executive branch in that they don't make decisions based on what the president says. They operate independently. And until Trump, that was always the case. That was always the case. It was known that the DOJ was independent from the executive branch. The DOJ did not take orders from the president of the United States. The attorney general was the one that separated the DOJ and the executive branch.
Well, what happened is presidents deferred to attorney generals in some decision making, and sometimes not. But the attorney general, in the end, had to do what the president said. And if it was unlawful or something he disagreed with, he could resign. But the president had the power, in theory, to direct. And that was one of the issues that Trump didn't exercise, in my view. He should have exercised better oversight and more direct oversight over the Justice Department, over its misconduct.
And I'm fine. I think everybody has the right. I just want to say, I think everybody has the right to theorize that maybe Biden was overly involved. But overall, unless you have evidence of that, I think it's not. I don't think it's
Well,
responsible.
Brian, I would
Okay.
argue that we do. I would argue that we do have evidence that's beginning to emerge, particularly with the Missouri Attorney General's release of the documents related to Facebook. We see clear administrative action there, and let me say this: that we aspire for the DOJ to act independently, but that's only as a political expediency, not as an administrative one. The president actually does have control over the Justice Department, and he can try to give a patina to the country that he's allowing them to act independently. But in candor, in reality, that is functionally not always the case. Plus, it is not required that that be the case. We only do that because it would look stupid to politicize, and arguably this current Justice Department seems politicized in areas where you see that him working at the behest of the White House, for example, to go after parents in Loudoun County, Virginia, to cause them harm and put threatening things at them so they'd stop exercising their constitutional rights to oppose their politically elected leaders. Now, so don't even think that there is not politics when it comes to the Justice Department. We hope that that doesn't happen, but in reality, it does, and actually, that's how it's set up. So you know.
I have to run. I just want to make a point before I leave, Mario, is
Go ahead, Tom.
these are just great debates to have. And in America, we have a way of resolving those debates. It's they're passing laws under our Constitution. And our Constitution protects certain rights. And the laws are supposed to be in court with those rights. The laws are supposed to be fairly administered. And our rights the job of the government is to protect those rights. And, so these debates are interesting to have. But the question is the law going to be vindicated? And is the rule of law going to apply in how these things are worked out? Or is it going to be done through fiat and through abuse of power? And the danger is there's been one side of the political debate that has forgotten about the basis of America, that we resolve these debates with an acknowledgement that the Constitution protects certain rights you can't cut into, and that the law requires you to manages your proceedings in other areas. And unfortunately, we've kind of lost our way there because, as I said, we've got this revolutionary left where the veil's been lifted and all bets are off. So those are the dangers we're facing, and we're seeing it fight quite forthrightly as others have acknowledged this recent non-Twitter file release, but more important in many ways, of White House officials directly demanding material be taken down. Brings it straight into Biden's Oval Office in a way that we hadn't seen before, that I think is going to be of great interest to Congress if they dare want to move on impeachment and other issues. Thank you, and have a great night, everyone.
Thanks, Tom. I want to go to Caroline. Final words, and Tyra. Then we'll end it with the co-hosts, Jim, Nick, and Ian. Go ahead, Caroline.
Awesome. Thank you, Mario.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you. I just wanted to answer your question about left versus right and
About
balance
censorship
there.
and the
Yes.
balance. So do you mean like
Yes.
whether censorship is a political or systematic issue, or another question?
Political or systematic. I tend to think that it's a people problem. We've all heard that politics is downstream of culture, and I think that we all know there are politicians on both sides who do things that they shouldn't do and are corrupt. But it's a different story when those people do things that they shouldn't be doing or not actually in line with the law, and their party supports them and applauds them. And there's a reason why, when you look at polls, you see that a lot of people on the left have done away with friends because they disagree. And that's the same reason why all of the left-leaning social media platforms have been censoring conservative ideas. Now, that's not to say, I know Brian and Ed will want to bring up, a handful of instances when that has happened. I don't think that's an honest argument to make. We're talking about, by and large, the trend is in a particular direction. Yes, there are people on both sides. I think that it necessarily is a tools problem because we've watched the government literally sidestep the law, the Constitution. They don't need the tools. The law is upheld by people. The Constitution is upheld by people. And if those people refuse to enforce the law and uphold the Constitution, they don't need tools. They're going to do what they want to do. And to a degree, they've been doing it. So I think it's a people problem because you're going to have corruption on both sides. But when you have people cheering on particular activities, you're going to see more of it. And polling shows which side of the aisle, by and large, you're seeing that on.
Thanks, Caroline.
Could I?
Tara, yes, of course you can. Good to have you back.
Yes. Thank you. Hi, Mario. Hi, everyone. Look, I don't believe in censorship, but I also think that the concept that only the left will use power and censor when they have it is, I don't understand that. I mean, let's start with initial things about, locking her up. Donald Trump saying things like that, all of his supporters saying that, that's sort of canceling at least a person. But let's go to something more interesting. Let's take Ron DeSantis. So he's in a state where he has power, right? He is very popular. He controls the legislature. And look at what he's doing. He passed a law. He had them pass a law in a special session against Disney, completely against them for no economic reason that anyone can come up with. That actually it hurts the taxpayers of his state because he didn't like the fact that they were supporting against the colloquially phrased "Don't Say Gay" bill. That was censorship. I'm sorry, that's a nonsense bill because he has power and he's trying to say to a corporation, "You can't speak about this, otherwise I'm going to punish you."
But
that's
Pat,
exactly what he. Can I?
Let-
Excuse me. Can I finish because I think everybody else spoke. Thank you so much. I also feel.
I would like Jim to reply after you're done.
Absolutely. I also feel that a bill that the what's it called? It's the Stop Wrongs to Our Kids and Employees Act. It goes way too far. It's clothed in the sense of, oh wow, we're against woke culture and we're trying to stop this. But in point of fact, as a federal judge said, it's positively dystopian. It actually censors people's free speech, professors on campus, things like that. If you look at the Alabama law, of the once again colloquially phrased, the "Don't Say Gay" law, it's it's pretty draconian, K through 5. If you even speak about sexual orientation, which by the way can come up in very innocuous ways, right? You're penalized. Teachers can't do this. So I guess I'm not saying the left isn't doing this, but I'm saying the idea that if the right is in power, they will not do this, to me, strikes me as foolhardy. And we see it all over. We see it, frankly, in even places, this is not censoring, but even when you have influence like the Federalist Society, they have spent 40 years trying to get judges on the courts who agree with their positions. They have succeeded. Many of these judges are qualified. Some are not that qualified, but they are ideologues. And that's fair. That's legal. But it's not
how are they ideologues?
How are they ideologues? Look at Judge Cannon and her ruling in the, in the Florida case. She shouldn't have even been involved in that case. Basically, they are activists. And once again, fair enough. The Supreme Court is actually conservative activists now. They are overturning things when they don't need to. It used to be the policy of the court.
No, they're originalists. It's not the same thing.
No, they're not. Originalism
yes, they are.
Is sort of in the eye of the beholder. Sorry, I don't agree with that. Okay. The court basically used to take the position that we do not overturn things unless we have to reach an issue. Right? They didn't have to reach
an issue.
They did not have to read the issue in Dobbs. No,
because
they
a lot of these laws were put in place by activists.
They could have said 15 weeks is fine under the Missouri law. There are plenty of ways for them not to overturn Roe v. Wade, but they are choosing to go farther than they.
Issue.
They are choosing to go farther than they normally would have. I'm saying it's activism.
To have abortions in places like New York.
Listen. Well, we'll see if the Republicans get their way, they will ban abortions nationwide. I don't think that's going to happen in Congress.
It is not going to
that's
happen.
Fine, but they want to do that.
Issue. It is
the
a state
point
issue.
Is yes, except for the fact that the point is they're trying to do this. So when you're trying to say to me
no one
that
is
Republicans
trying to do this. You can have Lindsey Graham out there saying stupid shit, but it's never going to get
there's
done.
A bill in the House that is actually out there that might even be passed for all I know, given that they now control and
the one that was passed in the Senate, and it requires Biden to sign off on it.
The Senate will not. Yes, but they're trying to do. You're trying to tell me that the Republicans are pristine, the conservatives. They would never do these things.
Are just blustering. They're not going to do anything.
Oh, I see. So when they do it, it's just blustering. But when Democrats do things, it's an affront to our complete system. And Democrats are they're all commie liberals trying to
Biden is trying to make it illegal to have laws that say you cannot trans your kids.
Listen, I also read the Alabama law, which basically says parents can't even make decisions for their children, right, in terms of transgender. I don't want to get into that issue. That's obviously very fraught for a lot of people. What I'm trying to say is nobody is above reproach. This is like Caesar's wife. We are not Caesar's wife here.
In places that are
No,
controlled by the
I am
left,
saying
such as
that.
Canada, for instance,
Are
it is
you
illegal
actually
for a
denying?
parent to say that their child isn't trans. It's illegal for a parent to determine if it is okay for a child to, a child who cannot consent, by the way,
You are
for teachers to
claiming.
go out of their way to say, hey, you're trans, and then the child says, yeah, okay, and the parent says, no, this is not okay. They get the child taken away by CPS.
Ian, I don't know anything about Canada. I'm speaking about the
And
United
this is
States.
also happening in Texas,
what
where
I'm
the Supreme
trying-
Court there, which is, by the way, liberal, determined that a dad could not see his child anymore, and that his child could go to California and get a sex change. His child is a minor, by the way.
Listen, what I'm trying to say to you is that people are people, and when they get in positions of power, they often overstep, and that is true whether left or right. You have been trying to claim that the right would never do these things. I don't see that at all, because I see these laws being passed. Thank you.
The right is trying to protect the sanctity of childhood. Okay, I'll let Jim speak. I'll let Jim speak shortly, but I'll just say this, okay? When you're going about, when you're talking about DeSantis doing the don't say gay bill, which, by the way, is complete bullshit. It's not a don't say gay bill. It is stop grooming our kids bill. It's an anti-grooming bill. It prohibits teachers from indoctrinating children with transgender ideology. That's what it does, right? It stops kids from being told that, that they are evil because they are born white. This is what critical race theory does. It tells kids that they're evil because they're white. It says that, as a teacher, you're not supposed to teach kids these things. This is fucked up. Okay. And to say that that he is censoring them somehow by preventing them from, by preventing teachers from indoctrinating children with this kind of monstrous ideologies, anti-American, anti-Western civilization ideology, that is somehow censorship, that is ridiculous.
Can I ask you? Can I ask you
That is
something?
not what critical race theory is, by the way.
Make a note real quick.
It is what critical race theory is.
No, it's not. No, it's not.
Yes,
okay,
it is.
so
Ian,
define critical race theory.
But guys, let's get to the fundamental point of Tira's argument here, because Tira, I have to correct you on one thing. You made the claim that what we're arguing for is it's just the left that does this. I did not argue for that. I did argue that that's what's happening for the most part right now. Like the tendencies at present are on the left for doing that. And that is a concern. But I also made the point just shortly before you made your argument that these tools are the problem, because human nature is such, where you and I agree, on the left or the right, to try to take over people. Like the tendency to censor definitely existed back in the 70s and 80s, maybe even into the 90s on the right, and not on the left. That has shifted. So I think the tools are wrong. But every example that you gave, as I recall, every example was something that someone is doing in the areas of our governance that are political. So does Ron DeSantis want to pass that bill that is colloquially called "Don't Say Gay"? Well, yeah, but he did it through a legislature. Like, they passed it through a duly elected legislature.
So what?
The force.
The legislature is run.
The force of that law, right or wrong, indifferent, neutral, or benign or malignant, was done through a legislative process. What I'm arguing for is the concern for where we're at right now is that extrajudicial, extra legislative processes are in place to shut down political opponents. Those extrajudicial, extra legislative processes are restricted under the 4th, 5th, and 6th Amendment of the Constitution as it relates to the Twitter files. And yet government officials are bypassing the normal process, the elective process, to implement a policy that is designed for a political end. And I would be against it if it's Republicans, conservatives, libertarians, as well as I would with leftist or liberal or classical liberal Democrats. It's wrong to do it. The Fourth Amendment is fundamental, for example, no matter what. The Fourth Amendment has been violated under the Patriot Act over and over and over again. It needs to change. So the problem, even though I'm honestly arguing that this is happening far more with Democrats and people of the left when it's being implemented now, my problem isn't that they are doing it or that it is them. My problem is not that it is them that are doing it. My problem is that while they are doing it, they're utilizing processes that need to change so that we get away from these problems that we're experiencing. And I've worked in Republican politics for a long time, and I got to tell you, it ain't fun for me because they drive me nuts, probably as much as they drive you nuts, just for different reasons.
Oh, I want to read out. I want to read out. Sorry, I'll let you finish your point, Jim, and I'll read out something that Multicultural BTC just sent me. I'm not going to bring you up, Multicultural BTC, because we need to end the space. But I'll actually do it now. I'm going to read out what Multicultural BTC. By the way, Jim, very well said. I just want to read this out. I would like to make the point and remind the panel. It's actually a really interesting point that cancel culture was created under good intentions. Women being free to speak up over their rapists and oppressors. Over time, people began to use cancel culture in other avenues. So then it was created with good intentions, then it was abused. So just a really valid point, a really good point that we could probably discuss in another space.
I do want to give a cancel culture space. I think that'd be fantastic.
That's actually good. Yeah. I'm gonna actually write that down. Yeah, I'm gonna write that down. I do want to go ahead. I'll go, Jim, if you don't mind. Yeah, I'll let you finish your point, Jim, and then I will go to Harry and Stephen, and then have Nick and Ian wrap it up.
Close down speeches. Yeah. Listen, the rape thing is very interesting because, and they're probably conservatives that
don't comment on what I just read out. Because then we'll just get into a whole.
I'm not. I'm transitioning from that. So anyway, It's a good one because that's one of those difficult areas that I think needed some help with. I'm against the Me Too movement, but that pretty much really does kind of encapsulate what we're dealing with. The tension that we have in this country and ever in a free country, which is against the tide of history, not with it, must be maintained as best possible through moral and ethical principles that are firm and that are firmly asserted. The best way to do that is the constitutional manner that we designed back in the day, that if we would hold to it, would allow everyone to agree and disagree, hate your policy, love your policy. That's the purpose of the Constitution, imperfect as it may be. We do not follow it as a matter of course right now. We're seeing that happen through the Twitter files right now. We see it happen through the Patriot Act. That's what we're striving for, is to get back to a set of rules that constrain ourselves from doing wrong, because every person on this space, every person that listened tonight, every person involved in social media or in politics anywhere are prone more to doing wrong than to doing right. We have to work very hard to get the right done, but we must have a guideline to make that happen. And when it comes to governance in this country, that guideline is the Constitution, and we have to reassert it.
Harry, I'll give you the mic before Stephen.
Yeah, so I just heard a couple things that I just wanted to jump in here. Critical race theory is not like this indoctrination or anything like that. It's just the study of how racism can be perpetuated through laws. Not necessarily saying that laws have racism written into them, but how they can be interpreted to perpetuate racism. And it's not like this Marxist theory. It's been taught in law school for decades now. Every conservative lawyer ever has been taught critical race theory. So it's not like this Marxist idea. I guess I just wanted to reiterate the kind of the topic of the space was, the Biden classified documents, that as it stands.
We should have a debate on critical race theory
I would
as
love
well,
to.
Mario, because I would like to rebut what Harry
can I
was
finish
saying,
my
but I
point
think it would
quickly?
take way too long. Oh yeah, go ahead.
I would actually, and Ian, I would love to join a space on critical race theory, but regardless.
Fantastic.
Yeah, so on the Biden classified documents, as it stands, Biden isn't being accused of any crimes. As it stands, there's no evidence of criminal wrongdoing. And yeah, I think that's about it. And again, once again, Mario, thank you.
I think what it triggered, pleasure to have you. I think what it triggered is the way that the authorities handled Trump's documents versus Biden's. I think that's what the main concern is. Nick's putting his thumbs up. But Stephen, thanks for being here, Harry, Tyra, and Caroline. Stephen, go ahead, man. It's been a while.
Yeah, it's been a bit. Sorry, I've been so caught up with just life and making money.
What do you mean life? Excuse me. Hold on. What do you mean? What do you mean life? Okay, making money fair. Isn't there no money in these no money in these spaces, but life? I don't know what you're talking about.
Oh, right. Of course. Anyway, great to hear from you again. Just to add to the conversation really quickly here, HB 1557. Just to be clear to the listeners, it does not ban the word gay from the classroom. It simply protects kindergartners through third graders from teachers and other officials who seek to essentially sexualize children at a young age. I don't know how else to put this. This shouldn't be a partisan issue. The stuff that HB 1557 stops is very disgusting conversations that are very inappropriate to be having with children from kindergarten to third grade. So this does not ban people from simply mentioning that they're gay. That's another myth about this. I just want to be very clear about that. Also, to pivot quickly to critical race.
Add to that real quick what you just said. HB
the word gay is never mentioned.
1557. Yeah, the word gay is not mentioned there, and it's basically an anti-grooming law. And just to rebut an earlier point that Piotr made, he said that Putin signed into law a homophobic bill. First of all, it was a law that was proposed by leftists in Russia. I just want to make that clear. It was left-leaning people, either communists or like just liberal leftists, who made that law because they were unhappy with the fact that teachers were trying to promote trans ideology to minors. So it's quite similar in Russia as well. So this idea that the anti-LGBT propaganda law is somehow used to ban gay people, that is again, a lot like the whole "Don't Say Gay" bill. It's very much the product of media manipulation. It's not the same thing. I just want to just put that out there because I don't like it when people lie about anything, whether you don't like the country or not. I think it is important to be precise and accurate and factual. Anyway,
being factual, can we just discuss and I'm saying it colloquial, sorry, because it's too long to say the whole name, don't say gay. So it's classroom instruction by school personnel or third parties in sexual orientation. Wait. I'm sorry. Then I will just say House Bill 1557. Fine. You're happy? Okay. Classroom instruction by school personnel or third parties in sexual orientation or gender identity may not occur in kindergarten through grade 3, quote, and then there's another clause, or in a manner that is not age appropriate or developmentally appropriate for students in accordance with state standards. Now, you might think that only applies to K through 3, but the language, maybe inartfully drawn, I don't know, basically applies to students in any grade. So be careful when you talk about, let's be precise.
Do you think it's okay to show children pornography?
Listen to me.
No, I'm asking you a question. Do you,
of
yes
course
or no?
not.
Okay, so then you agree with the law.
Ian,
you agree with the law.
No.
You agree with the law because
this
that's
is
all
what
the law does.
No, Ian, you're wrong. This is what I
am
think
correct.
happens.
No,
you are not.
No, because
you are not.
They were teaching
Listen to me. They're not teaching that.
They were teaching
this is
children.
all.
No, there is proof. This is a book called Genderqueer. They're teaching that in schools. It is pornographic in nature. It's teaching children how to have sex, and it's graphic. It has two minors,
please finish?
Two minors
no, I guess
sucking
not.
each other off. Okay,
go ahead, Tara.
Okay, so listen, I'm not going to speak about whether individual school districts have done disgusting things, or certainly individual teachers, especially in like private schools in New York, have done some really weird things. That's true. And I don't agree with showing kids pornography, etc. But here's the thing. In most schools in K through 3, you're asked to draw a chart, right? Of you're asked to draw a picture of your family tree, what you did this weekend. There's all sorts of things like that. Kid comes in, he's the son of 2 gay parents. Let's say 2 lesbians. Who cares? 2 men, 2 women, doesn't matter. He draws that family tree. Some other kid said, "What's that? Why don't you have a mother and a father? Or why do you only have one? Because lots of kids only have one." And the teachers feel that they can't mention that. Because
not
this,
true. That's not
no,
true.
that is true.
The bill
That's
does
how
not
they
prohibit.
feel.
They
It-
mention it. This
it
is
may
activists who are
not-
blowing it out of
No,
proportion and saying,
I'm
"Oh, this is
telling you that I have
anti-LGBT. This is preventing me from talking about my
So
sexuality."
we'll go. So
or
guys.
blah, blah, blah.
So I'm gonna. Yeah, I think this is a separate debate. Maybe I'll give them
It's
my
not even a debate. It's like she's just factually
separate
wrong.
discussion.
She's just factually
and for
incorrect.
this is but this is exactly what a debate is, Ian. When both parties say you're factually wrong.
Well, I can read the law. I can read
Okay. So
I just read the law.
yeah, and Tyra is it, but Tyra, I would say Tyra isn't a retired attorney, so just give it a bit of credit there. I haven't read the law, so I have no fucking idea. Just to be clear, both of you. But
I
I'll
want to make a point real quick.
Yeah,
because
go ahead,
this
Nick.
law is called the parental
Nick,
rights
you're not
and
helping, bro.
education bill. It's not the don't say gay law. I just want to be clear. That's the name of the bill.
And
Hey,
if you
I'm
wanted
going
to
to stand
have a
up for
bill,
Tara
but you're
and
not
say that Tara did not say it was the no, don't say gay bill. Tara honestly said it's colloquially called that, and she did it so that she could properly reference the bill. For that, I stand up with you, Tara, because I know what you were trying to do, and I think people need to understand that.
I think it's quite wrong to even refer to it as that because it's deliberately using activist language.
It absolutely is, and
poisons
I don't
the
know that
well.
Tara thinks that it's absolutely wrong.
It
But
poisons the well.
I just want to say she was just trying to make sure that people understood which she was referring to, and I don't think she was intending to put an epithet on it per se. She might think that it's the don't say gay bill, but I think she was just trying to reference it so everyone knew what she was talking about. And I think that was honest.
How are you guys even able to focus on what Tyra or anyone is saying, Ian? It's been 4 hours, Nick, Jim, we're in this space. I don't get what
I'm a
you're.
very alert person.
Dude, let me go. Let me go.
You guys, all three of you have a problem. Look, I think it's a great space. It's a great discussion. I think we can go on for another 5 hours. And I see a lot of people in the audience that have been there since the beginning.
They're ready to go, but we gotta go.
I just remember, guys. So I've pinned above the newsletter that the team wants me to keep shilling, where they'll summarize the points made in every space. So do subscribe, and we'll see you in the next space. I think the next one, obviously there'll be something happening, like Twitter files or something happening that we'll have to do on tomorrow.
Or Brazil, there could be a thing. We could
Brazil again. Brazil again.
Hey,
If we can
I got to
get
tell you on
Glenn
the
Greenwald
Brazil
on,
thing,
yeah, why
I
not?
am getting
Don't tell us.
overloaded with stuff from people in Brazil. There's a lot to talk about if we want to do that. So
There is indeed. There is indeed.
Yeah, Brazil is one. There's a few topics. We have the Ukraine war. We're planning a big space on the Ukraine war, even though we covered it a bit today. But getting people
in fact,
that
I'm going to, sorry to jump in, but on the Brazil thing, I can bring in some congressmen from Brazil. I'm getting contacted by these people. It'd be very cool.
Yeah, for sure. All right, guys. I think it's a great space. I need to have a life, as Stephen mentioned.
You need to sleep? Is what
I need to sleep. Yeah, the sun's about to go up. And yeah, we'll see you all next time. Follow all this. And yeah, we'll see you all next time. Follow all this.